The Armenian cartographer is the 1733 equivalent of a software update you've been ignoring for 6 months. He's a small, quiet man who communicates mostly through the sheer, "I told you so" energy of his silences. While I'm out here trying to look like a great general, he just points a finger at the map. Turns out, my brilliant supply route was basically the scenic tour of the Zagros Mountains. This guy found a shortcut that shaves 3 days off our travel time. In army terms, 3 days is the difference between "we have bread" and "we are currently debating which horse looks the most delicious." It's humiliating. My ego is taking a hit, but since it keeps me from being the guy who starved Nader Shah's army, I'll take the win and keep my mouth shut. If you're the kind of person who double-checks the shadows before trusting a map, join the council by subscribing. Signal your position and the hour. The council is waiting for your report from the front lines. You roll your shoulders and feel the knot between your shoulder blades that has been there since yesterday's grain calculation went wrong. The command tent smells like cardamom and old canvas. Dawn light filters through the fabric in stripes. Gold where the sun hits, shadow everywhere else. You haven't slept properly in 3 days. The map spread across the worn carpets show troop positions across 500 miles of hostile Ottoman territory, and every position marker represents a decision you made that could get 80,000 men killed if you got the distance wrong by half a day's march. Your tea sits beside the ledgers. It's already cold. You don't remember brewing it. Hoofbeats approach from the east, the rhythm of a rider who has been moving fast for hours. The canvas wall ripples as he dismounts. Dust rises in the early light. A scout enters without ceremony, his face streaked with road grime, his Persian clipped and efficient. The Ottoman positions remain unchanged, the rider said. Artillery status, you said. Crews ready at dawn, he confirmed. Good, prepare the morning briefing, you said. He leaves. The tent settles back into the quiet rustle of parchment, and the distant sound of an army waking up. Metal on metal, low voices, the crackle of breakfast fires being lit across a camp that stretches for a mile in every direction. You turn back to the maps. The Zagros Mountains run like a spine down the eastern edge of the page. Your supply convoy is supposed to follow the main pass, the one every army has used for 300 years because it's wide, it's documented, and it doesn't require a cartographer to navigate. That was the plan. Dawn reconnaissance reports arrive via dust-covered riders. The dust is authentic. The reports are urgent. Your tea is already cold. This is how every campaign day begins. The Armenian cartographer arrives just after the scout leaves. He doesn't knock. He simply appears at the tent entrance with a leather case under one arm, and the expression of a man who has been waiting for you to realize you need him. He sets the case down beside the central carpet, unrolls a second map, his map, and places it beside yours without a word. His finger lands on a pass you didn't know existed. It's narrower. It cuts through terrain you assumed was impassable, and it's 3 days shorter. You stare at the two maps. Yours shows the standard route, his shows a better one. The difference is the kind that wins campaigns or loses them before the first shot is fired. This pass is shorter, the cartographer said quietly. I missed it, you said. The terrain hides it well, he said. Your maps win battles, you said. He doesn't smile. He simply rolls his map back up, tucks it into the case, and leaves you alone with the correction and the taste of cardamom and humiliation. Outside, the camp continues its slow assembly into combat readiness. Somewhere in the distance, a janissary drum starts its morning pattern. Low, steady, the kind of rhythm that measures time in heartbeats instead of hours. You make a note in the ledger. Convoy rerouted, new timeline, grain delivery advanced by 72 hours. The mathematics are simple, the politics are not. Nader Shah expects results. The tribal khans expect their cut. The artillery crews expect powder and shot. You expect to stay alive long enough to see whether any of this works. The canvas ripples again. The wind is picking up. By noon, the dust will be thick enough to taste. For now, the air is still cool, still breathable, still carrying the faint scent of jasmine from whatever garden used to exist here before the siege turned the ground into a grid of tents and supply depots. You pour fresh tea. This time, you drink it while it's hot. The second map is still on the table when you return from the morning briefing. The Armenian cartographer left it there deliberately. No note. No explanation. Just the map and the quiet certainty that you would come back to it. You do. The briefing ran long. 17 officers, each one representing a different contingent. Persian regulars, Turkmen cavalry, Afghan irregulars, Kurdish scouts. Every group has its own supply requirements, its own chain of command, its own opinion about how the siege should proceed. Your job is to make all of them move in the same direction at the same time without any of them realizing they're being coordinated. It's like herding wolves. Wolves with artillery. The cartographer's map shows elevation lines you didn't account for. He's marked water sources. He's noted where the terrain narrows enough to create a choke point, where it widens enough to allow a flanking maneuver, where the rock is soft enough to dig entrenchments, and where it's too hard to bother trying. This is not a map. This is a tactical manual disguised as parchment. You trace the new route with one finger. The main pass, your original plan, runs through open ground. Visible. Predictable. Easy to defend against if the Ottomans figure out you're using it. The cartographer's route runs through a series of narrow valleys that don't appear on the standard charts. Invisible from the ridgeline. Defensible only if you know it exists. The Armenian cartographer has corrected your supply route. His correction is quiet. His genius is undeniable. Your pride is adjusting. You roll the map carefully and set it aside. Outside, the camp is in full motion now. Thousands of men moving through the choreography of a siege that hasn't started yet, but feels like it's been going on for months. Horses being fed, weapons being sharpened, tents being reinforced against the wind that picks up every afternoon and doesn't stop until dawn. The cartographer appears again just before midday. This time he brings a wooden case filled with survey instruments. A compass, a sextant, a measuring chain that looks older than the Persian Empire. He sets them down beside the maps and waits. You ask the question he's been expecting. How long to survey the new route? 4 days, he says. If the weather holds. 3, you say. He considers this. His face doesn't change. He simply nods once and begins packing the instruments back into the case. You assign him an escort. 2 scouts who know the terrain. 1 engineer who can assess whether the ground will support wagons. They leave within the hour. The cartographer rides a small, quiet horse that looks as unimpressed by the whole situation as he does. By evening, the first supply convoy has been rerouted. The logistics officer, a man whose entire personality is built around the phrase, "that won't work," reviews the new timeline and finds nothing to object to. This is the highest form of praise he's capable of giving. You return to the tent as the sun sets. The light through the canvas turns gold, then red, then dims to the blue-gray of early night. Someone has left fresh tea. It's still warm. The maps are spread across the carpet again, yours and his. The old route and the new one. The difference between them is 3 days of march time, 2,000 fewer casualties if the Ottomans try an ambush, and 1 cartographer who communicates entirely through the medium of being correct. You drink the tea. Outside, the Janissary drums have stopped. The camp settles into the low hum of 80,000 men trying to rest before tomorrow's work begins. The wind picks up. The canvas walls ripple and strain. Somewhere in the distance, a horse screams, not in pain, just in the bad temper of an animal that has been walking all day and isn't done yet. You make a note to check the cavalry lines in the morning. The convoy timeline is fixed. The route is optimized. The maps are accurate. Your pride is still adjusting, but the army will eat. That's the part that matters. The summons arrives just after dawn. A single line in Persian, written in the hand of Nader Shah's personal secretary. The Shah requests your presence. Immediately. Requests. That's the polite version. What it actually means is, drop everything, walk very carefully, and prepare to defend every decision you've made in the last 72 hours. You roll the updated supply charts, tuck them under one arm and leave the tent. The camp is already awake. Fires lit, weapons cleaned, horses fed. The morning air smells like smoke and animal sweat, and the faint metallic edge of gunpowder from the artillery emplacements on the ridge. Nader Shah's command tent is larger than yours, larger than anyone's. It sits at the center of the camp like a silk-walled fortress, surrounded by guards who don't blink and don't smile, and carry sabers sharp enough to split a hair lengthwise. You've seen them demonstrate this. It was not a metaphor. You enter. The interior is darker than you expect. Heavy carpets cover the ground. Incense burns in a corner. Sandalwood, thick enough to taste. Maps cover every available surface. Nader Shah stands in the center of the room, studying a tactical chart spread across a low table. He doesn't look up when you enter. You wait. A summons from Nader Shah is the 1733 equivalent of a performance review where the CEO has already decided to fire someone, and you have 4 minutes to prove it isn't you. The Shah has opinions about your supply calculations. He will share them at volume. The discussion involves reviewing your work while he watches you arrive at his conclusion independently. Your tent will smell of his temper for hours. You keep your head. For today. He looks up. His eyes are the kind that see through walls. The siege is too slow, Nader said. The supply lines require careful management, Great Shah, you said. I require results, Nader said. The artillery positions are being optimized, you said. See that they are, Nader said. He turns back to the map. The audience is over. You have survived. You leave the tent and walk back through the camp. The sun is higher now. The heat is building. By midday, the temperature will be brutal. The kind that turns metal too hot to touch and makes every decision feel twice as hard as it actually is. Your tent smells like cardamom and old parchment when you return. The maps are still spread across the carpet. The supply charts are still accurate. The convoy is still on schedule. Nader Shah's temper lingers in the air like incense. You can still hear his voice, flat, certain, allowing no room for error. The siege is too slow. The results are required. The artillery positions will be optimized. You sit down, pour tea, drink it while it's still hot. The leather binding of the ledger is warm under your palm. The temperature has been climbing since you left the Shah's tent. Outside, men are already moving more slowly, conserving energy, finding shade where they can. You pull the supply manifest closer and run your finger down the columns. Grain reserves, adequate for 19 days at current consumption. Water, 22 days if the wells hold. Gunpowder, enough for 3 major engagements or 6 weeks of skirmishing. The numbers don't lie. They also don't care about Nader Shah's impatience. A shadow falls across the tent entrance. The logistics officer steps inside without announcement, carrying a clay tablet marked with the morning's bread count. He sets it beside your tea without speaking. The number is lower than yesterday. Not critical, not yet, but trending in a direction you don't like. The ovens, you ask. Running full capacity, he says. Fuel is the limiting factor. You make a note. Fuel requisition. Priority, medium-high. The kind of detail that doesn't win battles but loses them if you ignore it long enough. He leaves. The tent returns to silence except for the scratch of your pen and the rustle of parchment. Outside, the Janissary drums start again. The rhythm is steady, the camp moves. The siege continues. You survive the audience. The convoy is rerouted. The cartographer's correction holds. Tomorrow you'll do this again. You are calculating grain requirements for 80,000 troops across 500 miles. The mathematics are complex. The reality is worse. The tribal khans will want their cut. The ledger sits open on the folding table, columns of numbers in neat Persian script. Each line represents 1 day's consumption for 1 unit. Infantry eat less than cavalry. Cavalry eat less than their horses. Horses eat constantly. You add the figures again. The total has not changed. You were hoping it would change. The assistant arrives with the secondary ledger before you ask for it. He sets it down without speaking. This one tracks the tribal levies. The Turkmen riders, the Kurdish contingents, the Baluchi scouts who joined 3 weeks ago and have been eating like they expect the campaign to end tomorrow. They might be right. The grain stores are sufficient for 3 weeks, the assistant said. And the tribal levies, you said. They expect additional provisions, the assistant said. Calculate the shortfall, you said. He pulls the ledger toward him. His quill moves in quick strokes. You watch the numbers accumulate. 4,000 additional units. That is 4,000 reasons for 2,000 horsemen to decide their loyalty has better prospects elsewhere. The Turkmen commander made it very clear during the last negotiation that his riders' morale is directly proportional to the quality and consistency of their rations. He phrased it as a proverb about eagles and generosity. You understood it as a threat. You stand. The tent feels smaller when you are calculating failure. The canvas walls hold the morning heat. Outside, the camp sprawls in organized rows. Infantry tents, cavalry lines, artillery positions, supply depots. From here it looks like control. From here you cannot see the grain shortfall or the tribal restlessness, or the fact that your entire campaign is 3 weeks away from becoming a logistics disaster. The assistant finishes his calculation. He does not look up. You do not ask him to. You already know what the number will be. The only question now is how to explain it to Nader Shah, in a way that does not result in you becoming a cautionary tale about supply officers who fail to account for Allied cavalry appetites. You return to the table. The maps are still there, under the ledgers. The Armenian cartographer's route saved you 3 days of travel. It did not save you from the fundamental problem that 80,000 men eat 80,000 men's worth of food, and that food has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is currently 500 miles behind you, moving at the speed of ox-drawn wagons across terrain that does not care about your timeline. The assistant places the calculation in front of you. The shortfall is worse than you estimated. You were hoping it would be better. You have stopped hoping for things to be better. You now operate on the principle that if you assume the worst possible outcome, reality will occasionally surprise you by being only slightly catastrophic instead of fully catastrophic. You fold the ledger closed. The numbers do not disappear. They wait inside the leather binding like a problem that will still be there when you open it again. The tribal khans will want their provisions. The infantry will want their rations. Nader Shah will want his siege to succeed. You will want to survive the next 3 weeks without becoming the answer to the question. What happens to supply officers who run out of supplies? The morning call to prayer drifts across the camp. You have not prayed yet today. You have been calculating grain requirements instead. God may forgive the oversight. The tribal cavalry commanders will not. The air inside the tent carries the smell of old parchment and newer anxiety. Ink, leather, the faint trace of yesterday's lamb stew that has soaked into the fabric walls. You notice these things now, because noticing them is easier than reviewing the calculation one more time. The assistant waits in his usual position by the secondary table. He has perfected the art of being present without being intrusive. It is a valuable skill in military logistics, where most conversations are variations on the theme of insufficient resources and impossible demands. Send word to the supply master, you said. He will want specifics, the assistant said. He will receive them, you said. The assistant gathers his materials and departs. You remain at the table. The calculation sits there. The shortfall has not improved through being examined from multiple angles. Mathematics does not work that way, despite your repeated attempts to convince it otherwise. Tribal loyalty shifts like sand dunes. This is not poetic metaphor. This is yesterday's Allied cavalry becoming today's negotiation problem. The sand dune comparison is actually generous. The scout arrives just after midday, when the heat has turned the camp into a geometry of shade-seeking soldiers, and the only movement is the slow rotation of men trying to find cooler positions under insufficient canvas. He does not wait for an invitation. Scouts never do. They operate on the assumption that their information is more important than your current task, and in this case, they are correct. The Kurdish contingent is restless, the scout said. What do they want, you said. Better terms, the scout said. Arrange a meeting, you said. He leaves the same way he arrived, quickly, without ceremony, like a man who has 16 other problems to report before sunset. You watch him go. The Kurdish contingent numbers 800 riders. They joined 4 weeks ago, under terms that seemed reasonable at the time. At the time you had more grain, and fewer concerns about whether your Allied cavalry would still be Allied by the time you reached Baghdad's walls. The term restless in military scouting reports translates to, they have not left yet, but they are discussing it loudly enough for others to hear, which means they want you to know they are discussing it, which means they are negotiating through the universal language of barely concealed threat. It is a very efficient system. It is also deeply exhausting. You pull the tribal alliance ledger from the stack. This one tracks payments, provisions, promises made during recruitment, and the delicate arithmetic of keeping 2,000 cavalry riders loyal enough to stay, but not confident enough to demand more than you can provide. The Kurdish contingent's entry runs 3 pages. Their commander is a practical man who measures loyalty in tangible benefits, and who has made it clear, through both direct statement and strategic silence, that his riders' continued presence depends on whether staying is more profitable than leaving. The ledger shows their last provisions distribution. 2 weeks ago, full rations, no delays. Their next scheduled payment, 8 days from now, contingent on the siege timeline holding. The siege timeline is not holding. The siege timeline is currently stretched across 500 miles of supply routes and tribal negotiations, and the daily question of whether Nader Shah's temper will focus on Ottoman resistance or internal incompetence first. You close the ledger and move to the tent's entrance. The camp spreads in every direction, a temporary city of soldiers, horses, siege equipment, and the complex web of alliances that holds it all together. The Kurdish contingent section is visible from here, marked by their distinctive green standards, and the way their horses are grouped in defensive clusters, rather than open lines. That clustering is new. It is also not a good sign. Horses grouped defensively means riders expecting to move quickly, which means riders who are not confident they will be staying long. The afternoon light catches the dust rising from the cavalry lines. Somewhere in that dust, 800 men are deciding whether their current terms are sufficient, or whether better opportunities exist elsewhere. You do not blame them. If you were a cavalry rider whose provisions depended on a supply line stretched thinner than the silk in Nader Shah's best diplomatic robes, you would also be restless. The meeting will happen tonight. It will involve tea, carefully phrased acknowledgments of mutual respect, and the practical negotiation of how much additional grain you can divert from infantry stores, without causing a different rebellion. The Kurdish commander will speak in formal Persian and imply, without stating directly, that his riders have received offers from other parties. You will respond with equal formality, and imply, without stating directly, that leaving now would be both unprofitable and strategically unwise, given Nader Shah's well-documented approach to perceived disloyalty. Neither of you will mention the actual stakes, that losing 800 riders 3 weeks before Baghdad weakens the siege, that weakness invites further defections, and that further defections turn a campaign into a catastrophe. These things do not need to be said, they sit in the silence between the formal phrases like the real negotiation happening underneath the performance. You return to the table, the ledgers wait, the grain shortfall has not resolved itself, the Kurdish contingent has not stopped being restless. Nader Shah has not become more patient. The only thing that has changed is that you now have one more meeting to prepare for, one more negotiation to conduct in the careful language of tribal alliance, where every word carries the weight of whether 2,000 cavalry riders stay or scatter, like those generous sand dunes you were just comparing them to. The sun moves lower, the heat holds. Outside, the camp continues its afternoon routine of preparation, maintenance, and the quiet tension of 80,000 men waiting for orders, while their commanders calculate whether the supplies will last long enough to matter. The hillside provides excellent tactical perspective. Baghdad's walls look significantly less defiant from up here. You make a mental note that elevation is the original force multiplier. The climb takes 20 minutes. Not steep, but persistent. The kind of incline that reminds your legs they have been standing in tents calculating grain logistics instead of maintaining the conditioning of a proper military officer. By the time you reach the command post, your breathing has steadied, but your tunic has not. The morning's heat followed you up the slope, and is now collecting in the small of your back. The post itself is a cleared platform of packed earth reinforced with timber stakes. 3 observation points, each marked with distance markers carved into standing poles. A folding table with maps weighted by stones. 2 artillery officers studying trajectories with the focused silence of men, whose calculations determine whether siege engines hit walls or civilian quarters. You have learned not to interrupt artillery officers mid-calculation. The last officer who was interrupted missed his target by 40 feet, and spent the next week explaining to Nader Shah why the palace gardens now contained a new and unplanned water feature. Positions ready for adjustment, the artillery officer said. Shift the eastern battery north, you said. Range will improve, the officer said. Execute immediately, you said. He marks the adjustment on his map and signals to the crew chief below. The crew chief acknowledges with a raised hand. Within minutes, the eastern battery begins its slow rotation. 8 men pushing a siege gun that weighs more than all of them combined, moving it 3 degrees north, because 3 degrees north means the difference between hitting reinforced gate and hitting reinforced wall, and reinforced wall breaks faster. You move to the western observation point. From here, Baghdad spreads like a lesson in defensive architecture. The Tigris runs silver through the city's eastern edge. The walls are older than most European capitals, and show it in the way old things show strength. Not through pristine condition, but through the fact that they are still standing after centuries of people trying to knock them down. The Ottoman garrison is visible as movement along the parapets. Not panicked. Not relaxed. The movement of soldiers who know they are besieged but do not yet know if they are defeated. Below the ridge, Nader Shah's army forms up in the slow geometry of siege warfare. Infantry units in their designated squares. Cavalry wings spread wide, ready to intercept any supply convoys or reinforcement attempts. Artillery positioned at calculated intervals, each gun sighted on its assigned section of wall. From ground level, a siege looks like chaos, held barely in check. From up here, it looks like what it actually is. A mathematical problem being solved with bronze cannons and cavalry patience. The second artillery officer approaches with a revised trajectory map. He does not speak immediately. Artillery officers communicate primarily through diagrams and the occasional grunt of professional disagreement. He sets the map on the table and points to the southern wall section. His finger traces the angle of approach, the elevation compensation needed, the predicted impact zone. You read the calculations. They are correct. They are also depressing, because correct calculations reveal that the southern wall is thicker than initial intelligence suggested, which means more time, more ammunition, and more days of keeping 80,000 men fed, while you methodically reduce stone fortifications that have survived since the Abbasid Caliphate. The sun reaches its apex. Heat becomes less of a condition, and more of an active presence pressing down on the hillside. The artillery officers continue their work without apparent discomfort. You suspect they have developed the professional soldier's ability to simply ignore physical hardship that cannot be resolved through tactical planning. It is a useful skill. You do not have it yet. Your tunic continues collecting evidence of the climb. Movement below catches your attention. A cavalry unit forming up near the western approach. Not full formation. A reconnaissance group, maybe 50 riders, preparing for a perimeter sweep. Their commander is visible by his position at the formation's head, and the way the riders orient toward him, without apparent signal. That is the Turkmen contingent. You recognize their formation pattern. They move like water finding its level. No rigid structure, just an organic flow that somehow maintains cohesion through pure understanding of who rides where and why. The Kurdish contingent remains stationary in their section. Their horses are still grouped defensively. The meeting is tonight. The terms are not yet negotiated. From up here, the restlessness looks like simple inactivity. From up here you cannot see the conversations happening in those grouped clusters, the calculations being made about whether better opportunities exist elsewhere, the careful measuring of how much loyalty costs and whether the current price is sufficient. The artillery officer finishes his trajectory calculations and departs without farewell. Professional courtesy in siege warfare is efficient, rather than warm. You remain at the observation point. The map spread before you show what the hillside perspective confirms. Baghdad will fall eventually. The walls cannot withstand sustained bombardment. The garrison cannot outlast an army this size. The only questions are timeline and cost. How many weeks? How many casualties? How much ammunition? How many negotiations with restless allied cavalry who want better terms and have the leverage to demand them? The wind shifts. Dust rises from the cavalry lines, carries across the slope, settles on the maps like the physical manifestation of everything that can go wrong, with a siege that depends on logistics stretched 500 miles, and tribal alliances measured in daily grain provisions. You brush the dust off the trajectory calculations. It returns immediately. The wind does not care about siege mathematics or artillery precision or supply officer anxiety. You make one final notation on the command map. The Eastern Battery adjustment, now complete and verified. The mark joins dozens of others, each one a small correction in the larger calculation of how to reduce a defended city without losing an army in the process. The work continues. The siege continues. The sun continues its transit across a sky that offers excellent visibility and no shade whatsoever. Below, 80,000 men wait for orders. Above you stand at the observation point, watching mathematics become reality in the slow motion of bronze cannons finding their range. The Turkmen cavalry commander arrives an hour before noon, when the heat has begun its slow conversion of the camp into a furnace where men move only when absolutely necessary, and shade becomes a form of currency. He is a weathered man whose face carries the accumulated geography of 40 years on horseback. 3 scars run parallel across his left cheek. His robes are dust-colored, practical, expensive, in a way that announces itself through silence rather than ornament. 2 younger riders stand behind him. They do not sit. You gesture toward the carpets. He settles with the deliberate precision of someone whose knees have survived more battles than most men's entire bodies. The tea arrives. He does not drink immediately. "The eagle does not hunt mice," the Turkmen commander said. You pause. The sentence hangs in the air like smoke, complete and impenetrable. This is going to be one of those negotiations. "Your riders deserve worthy prey," you said. He nods. The nod carries approval, but you are not entirely certain what has been approved. The younger riders shift their weight. One of them makes a notation in a small leather-bound ledger that looks older than you are. The commander sets down his tea, untouched. "The wolf respects the shepherd's strength," the commander said. You are translating in real time now. Eagle, mice, wolf, shepherd. These are not metaphors. These are compensation requirements dressed in wildlife imagery. The wolf respects strength. Strength, in this context, means provisioned horses, consistent grain delivery, and the kind of logistical reliability that keeps 2,000 cavalry riders loyal, rather than creatively reinterpreting their contract terms. "We will demonstrate our strength through provision," you said. The commander's expression does not change. This is, you are learning, the Turkmen equivalent of enthusiastic agreement. One of the younger riders steps forward. He carries a rolled parchment. He sets it on the carpet between you. It unfurls to reveal a list written in a hand so precise it looks like it was carved rather than written. Grain requirements. Per horse. Per day. Multiplied by 2,000. You scan the numbers. They are aggressive but not unreasonable. The aggressive part is that they expect payment before commitment. The reasonable part is that you would do exactly the same thing in their position. "The stream flows to the generous valley," the commander said. Water metaphor. Resources flow to those who provide them. This is actually refreshingly direct compared to the eagle situation. You pull the supply ledger from the stack beside you. The grain allocation for auxiliary cavalry is listed 3 pages in. You have margin. Not much, but enough to cover this if you redirect what was designated for the reserve stockpile. The reserve stockpile was optimistic planning anyway. You are not planning for a long siege. You are planning to make the Ottomans realize they are already defeated, and then negotiate terms that let them leave with sufficient dignity that nobody has to write home about the massacre. You make the notation, 4,000 additional units of grain, distributed over 2 weeks, front-loaded to the first 5 days to demonstrate immediate reliability. The younger rider watches your hand move across the page. His expression suggests he can read upside down, and is currently verifying your math. You slide the ledger across the carpet. He reads. He nods to the commander. The commander drinks his tea. This, apparently, is the Turkmen signature on a binding contract. "The falcon chooses its perch," the commander said. You are not entirely certain what that one means, but his tone suggests the negotiation is complete, and he is now offering something closer to tactical wisdom than contractual stipulation. He stands. The movement is fluid despite the knees. The 2 younger riders follow. One of them retrieves the parchment. The other makes a final notation in the ancient ledger. "Your riders will join the flank position tomorrow," you said. The commander inclines his head. It is not a bow, it is the physical equivalent of a counter-signature. They leave. You sit with the silence they have left behind. The grain reallocation will require 3 adjustments to the master supply schedule. The reserve stockpile will need to be recalculated. The convoy schedule will need to reflect the new distribution priority. You have just secured 2,000 cavalry riders whose loyalty follows fed horses rather than empty promises. This is how empires actually function. Not through grand speeches or divine mandate, but through grain calculations, and the ability to translate proverbs about eagles into logistical commitments that arrive on time. You pull the master ledger back toward you. The afternoon stretches ahead. The recalculations will take hours. The heat continues its work outside, turning the camp into a slow-motion test of endurance, where the only mercy is that nobody is currently shooting at you. The tea is cold. You drink it anyway. The Armenian cartographer is already in the command tent when you arrive. This is his preferred method of communication. He does not request meetings. He simply appears wherever the maps are, and then waits with the patience of someone who has watched 3 campaigns unfold exactly as he predicted they would. The map is spread across the low table, new annotations in red ink. You approach. This elevation provides artillery advantage, the cartographer said quietly. His finger rests on a small ridge northwest of your current position. The ridge overlooks the main approach to Baghdad's outer fortifications. From that angle, your batteries could target the wall junction, where 2 defensive sections meet at an awkward angle that looks impressive on an architect's drawing, and catastrophic under sustained bombardment. You had not seen it. He saw it 3 days ago, and has been waiting for you to ask the right question. The Armenian cartographer is the 1733 equivalent of a software update you've been ignoring for 6 months. He's a small, quiet man, who communicates mostly through the sheer I-told-you-so energy of his silences. While you're out here trying to look like a great general, he just points a finger at the map. Turns out, your brilliant supply route was basically the scenic tour of the Zagros Mountains. This guy found a shortcut that shaves 3 days off travel time. In army terms, 3 days is the difference between "we have bread" and "tomali." We are currently debating which horse looks the most delicious. You present it as your idea. He doesn't care. This is the healthiest professional relationship on the Ottoman frontier. Can we move batteries by tomorrow, you said. The path is clear, he said. He traces the route with one finger. The terrain favors wheel transport for the first half, then requires manual hauling for the final approach. Difficult but achievable. The gradient is steep, but not impossible. The artillery crews will complain. They always complain. The difference between a complaint and a mutiny is whether the order comes with accurate information about why the suffering matters. Your maps are invaluable, you said. They serve, he said. He rolls the map with the same economical precision he applies to everything. 3 campaigns of silent excellence compressed into that single gesture. He does not need your praise. He needs you to use the information correctly so that he does not have to watch another army lose a winnable battle because someone ignored the terrain. He leaves. You stand with the new artillery position burning itself into your memory. The ridge, the angle, the wall junction. The path that gets you there without announcing your intentions to every Ottoman scout within 5 miles. This is how battles are actually won. Not through heroic charges or inspirational speeches, but through patient cartographers who spend 3 days studying elevation lines and then show up with the answer before you have finished asking the question. You send for the artillery commander. The order is simple. Move 4 batteries to the northwest ridge. Begin at dawn. Complete positioning by sunset tomorrow. The artillery commander will ask why. You will show him the map. He will see what the cartographer saw. He will stop asking why and start asking how. The air in the command tent carries the scent of old parchment and lamp oil. The maps have their own smell, dust and ink, and the accumulated sweat of hands that have touched them across a dozen campaigns. You breathe it in. Outside, the afternoon wind picks up, carrying voices from the artillery lines, where crews are already preparing for the move they don't yet know they're making. Outside, the camp continues its slow preparation. 80,000 men in various states of readiness, waiting for orders that will either take a city or waste an empire's resources on a siege that drags into winter. You have the high ground now. You have the angle. You have the cartographer's quiet genius converting terrain into tactical advantage. The rest is just mathematics and timing. The artillery crews reach the ridge by mid-afternoon. They arrive tired, professional, and already calculating how much you are going to owe them for this. 4 batteries. 16 guns. Crews of 8 per gun. The mathematics of moving that much iron up a hillside that the cartographer described as achievable, and the men are currently describing in terms significantly less diplomatic. You watch from the command position. The ridge provides excellent sight lines exactly as promised. Baghdad's walls spread below like a scale model of imperial confidence that has not yet realized it is already outdated. The first battery reaches position. The crew chief is a compact man with the permanent squint of someone who has spent 20 years looking at things that explode. He surveys the elevation, the angle, the distance to target. He does not look pleased. You approach. The elevation angle is difficult, the crew chief said. Can it be achieved, you said. He gestures toward the gun. The barrel is angled upward at what looks, even to your untrained eye, like a geometry problem that wants to be solved with more ground and less ambition. With additional support, the chief said. Translation: yes, but only if you give me more men, and stop asking me to make miracles look easy. Bring more crews, you said. He nods, sends a runner. The runner departs at the specific pace of someone who has been asked to fetch reinforcements for a problem that should have been solved during the planning phase. You are recalculating. The elevation angle is steeper than the map suggested. Not wrong. Just optimistic in the way that two-dimensional representations of three-dimensional hillsides tend to be, when the person drawing the map is a genius, and the person executing the plan is standing in mud that the map did not mention. The additional crews arrive, 12 more men. They assess the situation with the weary competence of people who have done this before, and will do it again, and are billing their complaints at the hourly rate of artillery specialists whose skills keep them employed and perpetually exhausted. They work. Timber bracing goes under the gun carriage, rocks are repositioned, the angle adjusts by degrees. One of the crew mutters something in a dialect you do not recognize, but the tone translates perfectly. This had better be worth it. It will be. The wall junction sits directly in the firing line now. When these guns open up, the Ottoman defenders are going to discover that their fortification has a design flaw that only becomes apparent when someone is shooting at it from an angle the architect never considered. Artillery positioning requires mathematical precision. The hillside provides excellent sight lines. The artillery crews provide excellent excuses when calculations prove optimistic. You are recalculating. The second battery locks into position. The third follows. The fourth takes longer because the ground is softer, and the crew chief refuses to commit until he is certain the recoil will not send the entire assembly sliding backward into the supply wagons. By sunset, all 16 guns are positioned. The crews are exhausted. The angle is as good as it is going to get without rebuilding the hillside. You send word to Nader Shah's command tent, artillery positioned, ready to commence bombardment on your order. The confirmation returns within the hour. Hold position, commence firing at dawn. The crews settle into the cold evening. Fires are lit, rations distributed. The men eat in the tired silence of people who have just moved several tons of iron up a hill, and are now contemplating doing it all in reverse if this does not work. It will work. The cartographer does not make mistakes. He makes predictions that turn into fact, because he understands the ground better than the ground understands itself. You remain on the ridge as the light fades. Below, Baghdad's walls hold their shape against the dying sun. The city does not know yet. Tomorrow it will. The guns wait in their new positions, silent, patient, ready to convert elevation into advantage, and advantage into the kind of argument that ends sieges before they begin. The sound reaches you before dawn, low, rhythmic, coming from the Ottoman positions across no man's land. The Janissary drums continue their rhythm, morale maintenance through percussion. You respect the dedication even as you calculate how many days their grain stores have left. You stand at the edge of the command post, the pre-dawn cold settling into your joints. The drumming is professional, steady. The kind of rhythm that tells soldiers they are still part of an army, not a collection of individuals waiting to surrender. An observer approaches from the picket line. His boots make no sound on the packed earth. The drums continue, the observer said. Their morale remains, you said. But supplies must be low, the observer said. We maintain pressure, you said. The observer nods once and returns to his position. You watch him go. The drums keep their tempo. Somewhere behind those walls, a garrison commander is doing exactly what you would do, showing strength while the grain stores dwindle, maintaining discipline while calculating how many more weeks before the mathematics of siege warfare makes surrender the only rational choice. You return to the command tent. The ledgers are where you left them. 3 separate calculations, all arriving at the same answer. The Ottoman garrison has supplies for perhaps 2 more weeks, perhaps 3, if they are already rationing. The drums suggest they are not yet desperate enough for that. The canvas overhead catches the wind. The sound layers over the distant percussion. You have learned to read both. The wind tells you when storms are coming. The drums tell you when the enemy still believes they can win. You spread the supply reports across the table. Grain consumption rates, artillery ammunition expenditure, cavalry fodder requirements. The numbers form their own rhythm, less dramatic than drums, more precise. A junior officer enters with the morning scout reports. He sets them beside the ledgers without comment. You scan the first page. No movement from the Ottoman positions overnight. No attempt to break through the siege lines. No sign of the relief force that Baghdad has been expecting for 6 weeks. The drums are theater. You appreciate the performance even as you document its irrelevance. You pull the grain consumption ledger closer. The siege has entered its predictable phase. The phase where both sides know the outcome, but protocol requires the performance to continue. The Ottomans drum. You calculate. The siege progresses through its mechanical certainty toward the only conclusion mathematics allows. The officer who brought the reports remains standing at attention. Dismissed, you said. He leaves. You return to the numbers. The drums fade into background noise. Just another variable. Morale maintenance costs nothing, but impacts everything. The Ottoman commander understands this. You would respect him more if his logistics matched his theater. But they do not. The numbers prove it. 3 more weeks at most. 2 if they have been dishonest in their inventory reports. 1 if disease reaches the garrison stores. You record the assessment in the daily briefing document. Nader will want to know whether to escalate the assault or maintain siege patience. The answer is patience. The drums change nothing. The grain stores determine everything. The dawn light begins to change the quality of shadow in the tent. You have been awake for most of the night. The cardamom tea has gone cold. You drink it anyway. The bitter residue coats your tongue. The taste of every siege morning, every calculation made while others sleep. Outside, a horse snorts in the picket lines. The smell of their fodder drifts through camp. Sweet hay and grain, the scent of maintained strength. Your strength. The drums continue their rhythm beyond the siege lines. Professional, pointless, exactly what you would order if you were the one running out of food. The pattern emerges through grain calculations, not battle reports. You have been tracking Turkmen cavalry provisions for 3 weeks. The numbers show something the battlefield does not. Loyalty follows fed horses, not won victories. The realization arrives during a routine audit. You are cross-referencing grain shipments against tribal contingent positions. The Kurdish cavalry received their provisions 2 days late last month. Their combat effectiveness dropped 11%. The Turkmen received theirs early. Their effectiveness increased 9%. The correlation is immediate, brutal, completely invisible to conventional military assessment. You pull every grain shipment record from the past 6 months. The pattern repeats. Tribal cavalry measures strength in forage quality and delivery timing. Battle outcomes matter less than whether their horses ate well this week. This changes everything. You are redirecting grain from artillery stores to cavalry mounts. Nader will never know you nearly lost 2,000 riders. Your assistant enters carrying the secondary ledger. He sees the grain records spread across the table and understands immediately that something has shifted. Redirect grain from artillery stores to cavalry mounts, you said. The artillery provisions, the assistant said, will be adequate. This is about loyalty, you said. I understand, the assistant said. He makes the notation in the supply manifest. The reallocation will happen before the next shipment cycle. The artillery will have enough for the siege's final phase. The cavalry will have enough to stay. You have discovered the mechanism that holds Nader's coalition together. It is not ideology, not tactical brilliance, not the promise of conquest. It is grain shipments arriving on schedule to specific positions in quantities that demonstrate respect. The Turkmen commander never stated this directly. His proverbs contain the information, but you missed it, until the numbers made it obvious. The eagle does not hunt mice. Translation: do not insult us with insufficient provisions. The wolf respects the shepherd's strength. Translation: show us you can feed our horses and we will follow you into hell. You begin drafting new supply allocation guidelines. The document will look like routine logistics optimization. It is actually a loyalty retention protocol. Every tribal contingent receives provisions calculated to their strategic value, delivered with precision timing that communicates their importance to the campaign. The artillery officers will complain about the reduced allocations. Let them. Artillery does not desert, cavalry does. The mathematics of coalition warfare prioritize mobility over firepower, when the coalition's survival depends on keeping mounted warriors fed and convinced of your competence. Your assistant returns with the updated manifest. You review the new allocations. The grain flows toward loyalty maintenance. The siege will proceed. The Turkmen will stay. The pattern you discovered through ledger analysis has just prevented a collapse that would have ended the campaign. Nader will receive a brief note. Supply optimization implemented. Efficiency gains projected. He will never know you are calculating how close the alliance came to fracturing over grain delivery schedules. The morning heat builds inside the tent. You close the ledgers. The ink on your fingertips has dried to a fine dust. 3 hours of writing leaves its mark in smudged Persian script across your thumb. You have discovered the pattern in tribal loyalty. They follow strength but measure it in horses fed, not battles won. The pattern is clear now. Tribal loyalty is a supply chain problem disguised as a cultural complexity. Solve the logistics, and the loyalty follows. Fail the logistics and watch 2,000 riders vanish overnight because someone 3 ranks below you thought artillery powder mattered more than horse fodder. You file the report. The allocation changes will take effect immediately. You have become fluent in translating Turkmen proverbs into supply requisitions. The eagle does not hunt mice means better compensation. The wolf respects the shepherd's strength means show them fed horses. The translation dictionary is entirely in your head. The learning curve was steep. Every mistranslation cost weeks and grain shipments. But you now speak fluent Turkmen poetry to Persian logistics. It's the only bilingual skill where getting the grammar wrong can lose you an entire cavalry division. The translation system exists in 3 layers: surface meaning, tactical meaning, immediate action required. When the Turkmen elder says, "The stream flows to the generous valley," he is not discussing hydrology. He is stating that his riders will serve whoever feeds them best. Your response must acknowledge the metaphor, while committing to specific grain quantities. Respond in poetry, and you maintain respect. Respond in logistics and you reveal yourself as someone who does not understand how negotiations work when honor and horses are the same currency. You have the memory of the negotiation that taught you this, 3 months ago, the command tent. The elder sitting across from you, with the patience of someone who has watched younger men fail this test before. The falcon chooses its perch, the Turkmen elder had said. We offer the highest branch, you had replied. The stream flows to the generous valley, the elder had said. Our provisions flow abundantly, you had assured. The elder had nodded once. The negotiation was complete. 2,000 cavalry committed. You had spoken the correct language. If you had responded with grain quantities and delivery schedules, the meeting would have ended with polite refusal, and a cavalry wing lost to a rival who understood metaphor. You have built the translation system through necessity and error. Each proverb maps to a specific resource commitment. The falcon and the branch means premium provisions. The stream and the valley means consistent supply timing. The wolf and the shepherd means visible strength through well-fed mounts. Miss the meaning, and you lose the riders. Translate correctly, and you hold the coalition together. The system is entirely mental. No written guide exists. Writing it down would insult every elder who has spoken to you in proverbs. The language works because it requires fluency. Fluency proves respect. Respect secures loyalty. You have become the translator between two military traditions that share no common vocabulary. Nader speaks in orders and expectations. The Turkmen speak in eagles and wolves. You stand between them, converting poetry into logistics and logistics into poetry, maintaining the alliance through a translation skill that took 6 months and multiple near disasters to develop. The tribal contingents remain loyal not because they believe in Nader's vision but because you have proven you understand how to speak their language. The language where strength is measured in horse condition. Where insult arrives through insufficient grain. Where loyalty follows the commander who respects the metaphor enough to respond in kind. You close the correspondence ledger. Another proverb arrived this morning. Another request translated through wolves and streams. Another supply allocation adjusted to maintain respect. The translation dictionary grows with each exchange. The learning curve has flattened. You now recognize the patterns before the elder finishes speaking. This is the skill that holds the Eastern Front together. Not battlefield tactics. Not strategic brilliance. Translation. The ability to hear the eagle does not hunt mice, and immediately authorize additional forage shipments before the silence becomes an insult. The heat presses against the canvas. You have correspondence to draft. 3 tribal commanders expecting responses. Each response must be in proverbs. Each proverb must commit to specific resource allocations without stating numbers directly. This is how coalition warfare works, when half your army measures respect in metaphor and the other half measures it in rations delivered on time. You begin writing. The pen moves between Persian logistics terminology and Turkmen poetic structure. Fluent now. Finally, the cavalry officer arrives at the command tent just after dawn, when the air still carries the night's cold, and the camp is beginning its slow conversion from sleep to motion. He dismounts outside, ties his horse to the post, and enters without waiting for acknowledgement. 2,000 Turkmen riders have joined, the cavalry officer said. You look up from the grain ledgers. The number is precise, the timing is deliberate. The grain redirection executed 3 days ago has produced its result exactly when the logistics predicted it would. Position them on the eastern flank, you said. The officer nods once, no hesitation, no question about why the eastern flank specifically, or what role they will serve in the broader siege architecture. He understands that positioning cavalry is not about where they look impressive, but where they can respond fastest when the situation demands it. Their morale is excellent, the officer said. This is not empty reassurance, this is a field report. Morale among cavalry units is a tactical factor measured in response time and willingness to charge when ordered. Excellent morale means they will move when you need them to move, not 3 minutes later after internal debate about whether the order makes sense. Their horses are well fed, you said. The officer's expression shifts slightly, not surprise. Recognition. He knows what that statement means. It means you tracked the grain shipment to its destination and verified that it arrived intact. It means you know the condition of their mounts before he reported it. It means the logistics chain you built 3 days ago functioned exactly as designed. He salts and leaves. The tent flap settles behind him. You return to the ledgers. 2,000 riders on the eastern flank represents a significant tactical advantage. Not because 2,000 is an overwhelming number in an army of 80,000, but because those 2,000 are mobile, committed and positioned, where they can exploit any weakness in the Ottoman defensive line when it appears. The grain cost was 4,000 additional units. The return is 2,000 riders whose loyalty is now tied to your supply chain rather than abstract tribal politics. The mathematics are favorable. Outside, the sound of hooves multiplying. The Turkmen cavalry is moving into position. The eastern flank is no longer a static defensive line. It is now a mobile strike force capable of rapid deployment. You make a note in the margin of the ledger. The note is brief. It records the grain expenditure, the cavalry commitment, and the positioning decision. No commentary, no self-congratulation. Just the facts that will matter if someone reviews this document after the siege concludes. The tent is quiet again. The morning light is strengthening through the canvas. The air smells like dust and horse sweat, and the faint residue of cardamom tea from the cup you drank 2 hours ago. You reach for the next ledger. The grain stores are sufficient for 3 weeks at current consumption rates. The Turkmen cavalry will consume an additional 200 units per day. The mathematics still hold. The ink on the page has dried to a matte finish. You test it with one fingertip before closing the ledger. A habit formed years ago after smudging an entire supply calculation and having to reconstruct it from memory. The leather binding is warm, where the morning sun has been touching it through the tent opening. Outside, a horse snorts. The sound is close, perhaps 10 feet away. One of the Turkmen mounts, adjusting to its new position among unfamiliar animals. The wood of the campaign table has a grain that runs diagonally, interrupted by a knot near the center that someone tried to fill with darker wood paste. The repair is competent but visible. You have spent enough hours at this table to know its surface better than most maps. The air shifts slightly, cooler. A breeze moving through the camp from the direction of the river. It carries the smell of water and wet stone, a contrast to the dry dust that has dominated for days. The temperature will rise again by midday, but for now the tent interior holds this brief coolness like a gift. The eastern flank is secure. The cavalry is positioned. The siege continues. The Armenian cartographer enters the command tent without announcement. He carries no new maps. He sets nothing on the table. He simply stands at the edge of the workspace and looks at the eastern flank positioning marked on the large campaign maps spread across the carpet. His silence lasts longer than most people's speeches. You continue recording grain calculations. The 2,000 Turkmen riders consume at a predictable rate. The numbers align with the stores. No adjustments required. 2,000 Turkmen riders have joined your flank. This is because you redirected grain to their horses 3 days ago. The Armenian cartographer nodded approval. He understands logistics. He does not speak in proverbs. This is refreshing. The cavalry positioning is excellent, the cartographer said quietly. You set down the quill. Approval from the Armenian cartographer is not given lightly. He has corrected your routes, adjusted your supply lines, and identified elevation advantages that won artillery engagements before they began. When he says something is excellent, it means the decision will hold under pressure. The grain redirection worked, you said. He nods once. No elaboration necessary. The grain redirection was a calculated risk executed 3 days ago based on incomplete information about Turkmen loyalty and accurate information about horse nutrition. The risk paid off. The calculation was correct. Logistics win campaigns, he said. Before they begin, you said. This is the truth that most commanders learn too late, or not at all. Battles are won or lost, based on decisions made weeks before the first arrow is fired. Supply routes, grain stores, water access, terrain advantages, cavalry positioning, these determine outcomes more reliably than courage or tactical brilliance in the moment of engagement. The cartographer returns his attention to the map. His finger traces the eastern flank positioning, then moves to the supply routes feeding that position, then to the grain stores allocated to sustain it. He is not checking your work, he is reading the logic of the entire system to see if it holds together under examination. It does. He straightens. His hand moves to the edge of the map, smoothing a corner that has begun to curl in the dry heat. The gesture is automatic. Maps are his language. Keeping them flat is a form of respect for the information they contain. The siege will conclude within 2 weeks, he said. This is not optimism. This is projection based on supply mathematics, cavalry positioning, and the current rate of Ottoman resistance. 2 weeks is the point at which their grain stores reach critical depletion, and their defensive options narrow to surrender or starvation. You do not disagree. He leaves as quietly as he entered, no formal farewell. No unnecessary speech. He came to verify that the cavalry positioning made sense within the larger campaign architecture. It does. The verification is complete. You return to the ledgers. The grain calculations continue. The numbers align. The siege holds its shape. The parchment under your palm is slightly rough, made from goat hide rather than the finer lamb vellum used for official documents. It absorbs ink quickly, which means you must write with consistent pressure to avoid blotting. The texture is familiar now after weeks of working with the same supply. A fly lands on the edge of the inkwell. It walks the rim twice, testing the surface, then launches back into the air. The tent has been accumulating flies as the siege progresses and the heat intensifies. They are not numerous enough to be a problem, just present enough to be noticed. Your left shoulder carries a dull ache from sleeping on it wrong 2 nights ago. Not pain, just persistent awareness. It will fade by evening, then return tomorrow morning. This is the rhythm of living in a campaign tent, where the ground is harder than it looks, and the carpet provides less cushioning than it promises. The cartographer's footsteps have faded completely now. The camp outside has reached its midday operational tempo. Voices, movement, the clatter of equipment being maintained and repositioned. Outside, the eastern flank settles into its new configuration. 2,000 Turkmen riders, well-fed, well-positioned, waiting for the moment when mobility becomes the deciding tactical factor. That moment is coming. The logistics say so. The cartographer confirmed it. The mathematics are certain. The captured Ottoman envoy arrives under escort just before midday. He is not bound. He is not injured. He walks with the deliberate posture of a man representing an empire that still exists, even if the army defending it is currently surrounded and running out of food. The guards position him at the entrance to the command tent and step back. No weapons visible, no threat spoken. This is a negotiation, not an interrogation. He is older than you expected, grey in the beard, dust on his robes that suggests he rode hard to reach the siege camp. His eyes move across the command tent, with the trained assessment of someone who has spent decades evaluating rooms for power dynamics and exits. I represent the Ottoman governor, the envoy said formally. His Persian is flawless, no accent, no hesitation. He has done this before in other sieges, other camps, other negotiations, where the stakes were measured in cities rather than individual lives. "We acknowledge your position," you said. This is the formal opening, acknowledgement without concession. He represents authority, you represent force. The negotiation exists in the space between those two facts. "What terms does the Shah offer?" the envoy said. The question is direct. No preamble about honor or history or the long relationship between the Ottoman and Persian empires. He knows why he is here. Baghdad is surrounded. The grain stores are depleting. Nader Shah wants the city. The only question is what price he is willing to accept for a peaceful transfer, rather than a siege that ends in starvation and assault. "That depends on Baghdad's cooperation," you said. The envoy's expression does not change, but his posture shifts slightly. Cooperation is a word with many meanings. It can mean unconditional surrender. It can mean negotiated terms that preserve dignity and prevent unnecessary bloodshed. "We seek honorable resolution," the envoy said. Honorable resolution, this is the key phrase. This is what he rode through a siege line to establish. The Ottoman garrison will surrender if the terms allow them to leave with their lives, their dignity, and the ability to report back to Constantinople that they held as long as logistics permitted, but chose negotiation over pointless death. "That can be arranged," you said. The envoy exhales. Not relief, confirmation. He came prepared for three possible outcomes: acceptable terms, unacceptable terms, or immediate execution as a warning to Baghdad. The first outcome is now on the table. You gesture toward the carpet. He sits. You sit across from him. The space between you is measured in feet, but represents the gap between siege and surrender, assault and negotiation, bloodshed and honorable withdrawal. The garrison withdraws intact, you said. No prisoners, no reprisals. They leave with their weapons and their dignity. The city transfers to Persian administration without resistance. The civilian population is not touched. The envoy listens without interrupting. These are generous terms by siege standards. Generous enough that he will suspect a trap. Generous enough that he needs to verify the details before accepting. The garrison will accept these terms, the envoy said, pending clarification on the withdrawal route and timeline. This is the negotiation. The principle is established. The details remain. Withdrawal routes matter, because a garrison leaving under terms needs safe passage, not an ambush 3 miles outside the city. Timeline matters because coordination prevents confusion that turns negotiated surrender into accidental combat. The withdrawal begins at dawn tomorrow, you said. The route runs north along the Tigris, escort provided by Persian cavalry to ensure no interference from auxiliary forces unaware of the terms. The envoy nods slowly. The route makes sense. North along the Tigris provides water access and a clear path toward Ottoman-controlled territory. Escort presence prevents misunderstandings and protects the withdrawing garrison from opportunistic attacks by forces operating outside the formal command structure. Your word on the civilian population, the envoy said. This is the final verification. Terms that protect the garrison mean nothing if the city is sacked after they leave. He needs assurance that the civilian population, the merchants, the families, the non-combatants, will not pay the price for the garrison's surrender. My word, you said. The city is an administrative transfer, not a conquest. No looting, no reprisals. Order is maintained. The envoy meets your eyes. This is the moment where trust either exists or does not. He is weighing your word against the reality that Nader Shah's reputation includes volcanic temper and tactical brilliance, but not necessarily restraint toward conquered cities. I will convey these terms to the governor, the envoy said. His response will arrive by tomorrow at dawn. He rises, you rise, the negotiation is complete. The terms are established, the next move belongs to Baghdad. The envoy leaves under the same escort that brought him. The tent settles into silence. Outside the siege continues, but the mathematics have shifted. The Ottoman garrison now has a way out that does not require starvation or assault. The question is whether they will take it. You return to the maps. The withdrawal route is already marked. The escort cavalry is already positioned. The timeline is set. The siege is ending, not with fire, with terms. The surrender terms sit in 3 separate documents on the table. Persian for Nader Shah's seal, Ottoman Turkish for the envoy's dignity, Arabic for Baghdad's population. Each one says essentially the same thing, but the grammar proves complex, the politics prove worse. You are drafting surrender terms in 3 languages, Persian for Nader, Ottoman Turkish for the envoy, Arabic for Baghdad's population. The grammar is complex, the politics are worse. You are working with 2 scribes. One handles Persian and Arabic, the other manages Ottoman Turkish. Both are careful men who understand that a mistranslation here does not result in a polite correction. It results in a city burning or a cavalry charge that should not have happened. The Persian version establishes Nader's victory without ambiguity, strategic dominance acknowledged, terms dictated by the superior force. The language carries the weight of imperial authority. Every verb chosen to reflect power. Every noun positioned to remind the reader that mercy is being offered, not negotiated. The Ottoman Turkish version says the same thing, but softer. Honorable resolution between military powers. Garrison withdrawal with dignity intact. The language allows the Ottoman governor to sign without feeling he has surrendered so much as concluded an engagement that could not be won. This matters. If the envoy returns to Constantinople having signed a document that reads like total capitulation, his career ends badly. Possibly, his life. The Arabic version speaks to Baghdad's population. It reassures. Civilian protections guaranteed. No sacking, no reprisals. Markets remain open. Religious sites untouched. This version is the one that prevents riots, looting, and the kind of urban chaos that turns negotiated surrender into a blood-soaked nightmare nobody wanted. You draft carefully. The scribe beside you checks each line, comparing the 3 versions to ensure they align without contradicting. A phrase that sounds reasonable in Persian might imply something catastrophic in Arabic. An honorific that preserves Ottoman dignity might accidentally suggest Nader is offering terms rather than dictating them. The Arabic phrasing for garrison withdrawal, the scribe said. Honorable departure with arms, you said. And the Persian version, the scribe said. Strategic victory acknowledged, you said. The scribe nods. He writes both versions, checking them against the Ottoman Turkish text to ensure the meaning holds across all 3. The garrison leaves with weapons but under escort. Nader gets his victory. The Ottomans get their dignity. Baghdad gets to avoid becoming a crater. You review the civilian protection section next. This is where most surrender terms fail. Not because the conqueror lies, but because the language is vague enough that soldiers interpret it as license. You make the protections explicit. Markets protected, religious leaders granted safe passage, private property respected, violations punished by Nader's own command structure, not left to tribal justice. The Persian scribe pauses over one line. This clause, he said, the protection of civilian grain stores. Nader's army requires provisions. Provisions will be purchased, you said. Not seized, the distinction matters. He writes it down. The Ottoman Turkish version echoes the same principle. The Arabic version states it even more clearly. Grain purchased at fair price, receipts provided, no forced requisitions. This costs Nader nothing he was not already planning to spend, and it prevents the kind of resentment that turns occupied cities into ongoing security disasters. The documents take 6 hours to complete, each version reviewed 3 times, every clause cross-checked against the others. By the time the final seals are prepared, the light through the tent canvas has shifted from afternoon glare to early evening gold. The ink smell is everywhere now. 3 separate inkwells, 3 different formulations. The Persian ink, darker, more resinous. The Ottoman ink carries a faint metal scent from the additives that make it permanent on treated parchment. The Arabic ink is the lightest, designed for the quick calligraphy that flows across mosque announcements. The envoy will receive the Ottoman Turkish version tomorrow morning. He will read it, recognize that his dignity has been preserved, and sign without hesitation. Nader will receive the Persian version and see his victory formalized in language that flatters his strategic brilliance. Baghdad's population will hear the Arabic version read in the mosques and know that the siege has ended without catastrophe. 3 languages, 3 audiences, 1 outcome. You set the quill down, the ink dries quickly in the dry air, the terms are final, the siege effectively is over. What remains is ceremony. The formal exchange of documents, the garrison's organized withdrawal, the entry of Nader's forces into a city that will not resist because resistance has been made unnecessary. The scribes begin rolling the parchments. Each document will be stored separately, carried by different riders, delivered to its intended audience with the appropriate ritual. You watch them work. The precision is satisfying. The siege concludes not with a final assault, but with grammar and diplomacy, and the careful management of 3 separate versions of the same truth. The tent is quiet now, the constant negotiation, the back and forth between military necessity and political reality, has reached its end. What comes next is implementation, the logistics of withdrawal, the ceremonial entry, the slow transformation of a siege camp into an occupation force. You stand. Your back aches from hours bent over parchment. The scribes finish their work and leave, carrying the documents to separate storage. The command tent empties. Outside, the camp continues its evening routines. Fires lit, meals prepared, sentries changing shifts. The terms are drafted. The war, at least this part of it, is concluded. Baghdad will not burn. The garrison will not die in a final desperate defense. Nader will have his victory, the Ottomans will have their dignity, and the population will have their lives. You step outside. The air has cooled slightly. The siege lines remain in place, but they feel different now. Less like a noose tightening, more like a formality waiting to be dismantled. Across the distance, Baghdad's walls still stand. Tomorrow, they will open. The Ottoman envoy arrives at dawn with his escort. 6 men, unarmed, carrying the governor's seal and the authority to finalize terms. They dismount outside the command tent without ceremony. The envoy's face shows the careful neutrality of a man who has spent the night rehearsing this moment. You meet him with the Ottoman Turkish document already prepared. He reads it standing, his posture formal, his eyes moving across each line with the focus of someone checking for traps. There are none. The terms are exactly what you discussed. Honorable withdrawal. Civilian protections. No punitive measures beyond the reality of defeat itself. The governor will accept these terms, the envoy said after the second reading. Nader Shah's seal will be applied this morning, you said. The withdrawal begins tomorrow. The envoy nods. He rolls the document carefully, seals it with wax, and hands it to one of his escort. The man departs immediately, back through the siege lines, back to Baghdad's gates, back to the governor, who will read these terms and recognize that the siege has ended without the city's destruction. The formalities continue. Nader Shah arrives mid-morning to apply his seal to the Persian version. He reads it once, grunts approval and stamps the wax with the force of a man who considers the paperwork a tedious but necessary epilogue to the actual work of conquest. He does not linger. The siege is won. His attention has already moved to the next campaign, the next objective, the next map that will require his attention. The Arabic version is delivered to Baghdad's religious leaders by midday. You do not witness this exchange, but the report comes back within hours. The terms were read aloud in 3 mosques simultaneously, and the population received them without protest. Relief, mostly. The siege is over. The city survives. Life will continue under new management, but it will continue. By afternoon, the siege lines begin their transformation. Engineers start marking demolition points for the siege works that will not be needed. Supply officers redirect grain shipments toward occupation logistics rather than assault preparations. The artillery remains in place for now, but the crews have stopped calculating firing solutions. The math has changed. The walls are no longer targets. They are soon to be Nader's walls. You spend the evening coordinating withdrawal schedules with the Ottoman liaison officer who arrived in the envoy's wake. He is professional, efficient, and clearly grateful that this negotiation is happening at all. The garrison will leave in 3 columns over 2 days. Officers first, then infantry, then support staff. They will march east under escort. Weapons carried but not loaded. Colors furled but not surrendered. Dignity preserved through choreography. The Kurdish contingent that was causing problems 3 days ago has gone quiet. The arrival of formal surrender terms removed the ambiguity they were exploiting. There is no longer room for rival negotiations or separate deals. The terms are final. Nader's authority is absolute. They will receive their payments and withdraw to their traditional territories without further complaint. The Turkmen cavalry remains on station, but their role has shifted. No longer an attacking force, now a security presence. They will patrol the transition period, ensure the withdrawal proceeds without incident, and maintain order in a city, adjusting to new rule. The commander has already repositioned his riders. Less siege cordon, more urban occupation. Night falls over a camp that no longer feels like a camp preparing for battle. The tension that has defined every morning for weeks has dissolved. Fires burn without urgency. Conversations happen at normal volume. Sentries watch the walls out of habit, but there is nothing to watch for. Baghdad has surrendered. The gates will open tomorrow. The desert wind has changed direction, carrying the smell of the river instead of dust. Cooler air moves through the tent when you return to check the final documents one last time. Not because they need checking, they are complete, but because the rhythm of the last 3 weeks makes it difficult to simply stop. You return to the command tent as the last light fades. The maps are still spread across the tables, but they feel like historical documents now rather than active planning tools. The siege of Baghdad is concluded. Not with fire and assault, but with parchment and seals, and the careful management of language across 3 separate audiences. The cartographer's routes will not be needed for an attack. The artillery positions will not fire their final bombardment. The Turkmen proverbs will not need to be translated into a cavalry charge. Everything prepared, nothing used. Victory achieved through the threat of force rather than its application. You sit. The tent is quiet. Outside, the camp settles into an evening that feels different from every evening before it. The war continues. Nader's campaigns will not end with Baghdad. But this siege, this particular chapter, has reached its conclusion. The documents are signed. The terms are accepted. The city will open its gates at dawn. The command tent achieves something it is not known in 3 weeks. Silence. The scratching of quills on parchment has been the soundtrack of this siege, morning reports. Supply calculations. Diplomatic drafts. Liaison notes. Logistical adjustments. The sound of governance under pressure, continuous and unrelenting. It is fading now. The terms are drafted. The quills are resting. The tent is finally quiet. You sit in the stillness. and feel the absence of motion. No urgent reports arriving. No scouts returning with intelligence that requires immediate analysis. No officers waiting for orders. The machinery of siege command has powered down. What remains is aftermath. The slow administrative wind-down of a campaign that succeeded without the final violence everyone expected. The maps are still spread across the tables, but nobody is studying them. The supply ledgers remain open, but the calculations are complete. The diplomatic correspondence sits in neat stacks, organized by language and recipient, waiting for archive rather than action. Outside, the camp continues its routines, but even those sound different. Conversations happen without the undertone of pre-battle tension. Fires attended at a normal pace. The percussion of an army preparing for assault has shifted into the slower rhythm of an army preparing to occupy. You close the ledgers one by one. Each represents a different aspect of the siege: grain stores, weapons inventory, personnel rosters, diplomatic protocols. Together, they form the administrative skeleton of a campaign that mobilized 8,000 men, negotiated with 4 separate tribal factions, and concluded with a negotiated surrender, rather than an assault. The ledgers will be copied, filed, and referenced in future campaigns when someone asks how Nader took Baghdad without burning it. The Armenian cartographer's maps remain on the side table. His corrections are visible in the darker ink. The routes adjusted, the elevations noted, the shortcuts marked. 3 campaigns of silent excellence, recorded in parchment and precision. His genius turned what could have been a catastrophic supply failure into a textbook example of logistical efficiency. You leave his maps where they are. They belong in this tent. The tent canvas moves slightly in the evening air. Not the harsh desert wind of morning, but something gentler. The temperature has dropped enough to make the interior comfortable rather than stifling. You notice this because you have time to notice it. The constant pressure of the last 3 weeks has lifted. The brazier in the corner holds ash from days ago, cold now. You notice the particular grey of it. Not the black of fresh charcoal, but the pale dust that comes after fire has been absent long enough that even the memory of heat has faded. The tent has been running on urgency instead of warmth. That changes tonight. The Turkmen commander's final report sits on the corner of the table. 2 sentences in his formal script. The cavalry stands ready for occupation duty. The horses are well fed. No proverbs this time. The negotiation is complete. The language has shifted from riddle to plain statement. The grain has been allocated. The loyalty has been secured. What remains is execution. You think about the Ottoman envoy reading the terms in his tent across the siege lines. The relief in his eyes when he realized the language preserved his dignity. The careful neutrality he maintained throughout the negotiation, knowing that one misstep could collapse the entire framework. He will return to Constantinople with a document that shows he negotiated the best possible outcome under impossible circumstances. His career survives, possibly thrives. Baghdad's population heard the Arabic terms this afternoon. Markets will reopen tomorrow under Nader's authority. Religious leaders will continue their functions without interference. Private property remains protected. The siege ends not with trauma, but with transition. This matters. An occupied city that believes it was treated fairly becomes an asset. An occupied city that believes it was brutalized becomes a permanent security disaster. The quills rest in their holder. The ink has dried on the final documents. The parchment has been rolled and sealed. Everything that required writing has been written. Everything that required translation has been translated. Everything that required 3 separate versions has been drafted, reviewed, and finalized. You stand and move to the tent entrance. The camp spreads before you in the early evening light. Fires beginning to glow. Tents arranged in their precise geometry. Sentries visible at their posts. 8,000 men settling into an evening that no longer carries the weight of imminent battle. The siege of Baghdad is concluded. The documents prove it. The silence confirms it. You step back inside. The tent feels larger without the constant presence of officers, scribes, and liaison staff. The space returns to what it was always meant to be, a place for rest between campaigns, not a command center running at permanent crisis tempo. The cushions along the wall remain undisturbed. You have not used them in days. The carpet beneath the tables shows the worn paths where you paced, while thinking through diplomatic problems that had no obvious solution. The brazier in the corner holds cold ash from a fire lit 3 days ago and never relit because there was no time. You settle onto the cushions. The weight comes all at once. 3 weeks of siege planning, diplomatic negotiation, tribal management, and supply logistics. The constant calculation of what Nader wanted versus what was actually possible. The translation of proverbs into grain requisitions. The drafting of surrender terms that satisfied 3 separate audiences without lying to any of them. The tent is quiet. The quills rest. The siege concludes. Outside, Baghdad waits for dawn, and the opening of gates that will not be forced. Victory fires burn across camp. You watch them from the command tent entrance, small orange points scattered through the darkness, like a constellation pulled down to earth. The sounds reach you as distant echoes. Drums, voices, the particular percussion of celebration that happens when men realize they survived something that could have killed them. Your work stands complete. The terms are drafted. The envoy has returned to Baghdad with the documents that will open the gates tomorrow morning. The cavalry is positioned for occupation duty. The supply lines are secured for the march that will come after. Everything that needed to happen has happened. You should be out there with them. You are not. The tent behind you holds the accumulated documentation of 3 weeks. Maps, requisition lists, correspondence logs, grain calculations, the entire architecture of a siege rendered as paperwork. It smells like ink and cooling wax. The carpets underfoot still hold the impression of where the Armenian cartographer stood this morning, reviewing the final elevation charts. The silk cushions along the back wall remain undisturbed since yesterday. You step back inside. The canvas falls closed behind you, muffling the celebration noise to something softer, not silence, but the next closest thing. The brazier in the corner has burned down to coals. You add 1 piece of charcoal, watching it catch. The heat spreads slowly. Outside, someone is singing in Turkmen, one of the old songs about horses and loyalty, and the particular honor of serving a Shah who wins. You do not understand all the words. You understand enough. 3 days without proper sleep. Your body knows this in ways your mind has been ignoring. The weight settles into your shoulders now that there is permission for it to settle. Your hands feel heavy. Your eyes feel heavier. The final dispatch to Nader sits sealed on the writing table. Confirmation that all preparations are complete for tomorrow's occupation. You wrote it an hour ago in the clearest script you could manage, aware that exhaustion makes letters blur if you are not careful. The wax seal is perfect. The document will leave at dawn with the morning courier. You pour water from the bronze pitcher into the cup beside it. Drink. The water tastes like the leather of the water skin it came from, but it is cool, and your throat needed it. The celebration continues outside. Drums and voices and the particular sound of men who have earned the right to make noise. You are glad they are out there. You are glad you are in here. Both things can be true. The cushions along the back wall look softer than they did this morning. You move toward them slowly, carrying the awareness that your body has been holding itself upright through discipline alone, and that discipline is now optional. Your knees settle onto the carpet. Your weight shifts back. The silk receives you without resistance. The firelight moves across the tent walls in slow patterns. Orange and shadow. The canvas overhead frames it all, a geometry of support ropes and stitched panels that has been your ceiling for 3 weeks. You close your eyes. The drums continue, distant and rhythmic. The voices rise and fall. Somewhere out there, 2,000 Turkmen riders are celebrating the loyalty they demonstrated, and the grain that kept them fed, and the victory that justified both. The Armenian cartographer is probably in his own tent, alone, satisfied that his maps proved correct. The Ottoman envoy is behind Baghdad's walls, preparing his governor for surrender. You are here. The weight in your shoulders spreads downward, into your spine, into the cushions beneath you. Your breathing slows without effort. The tent holds its warmth. The celebration sounds fade to something you hear without listening to. The night air carries the smell of charred lamb and wood smoke and horses, the scent of an army that has stopped moving long enough to remember what food tastes like when you are not eating it in a saddle. The wind shifts slightly. Canvas whispers against rope. The brazier's coals pulse with each small breath of air that finds its way through the tent's seams. Your fingers rest loosely against the carpet. The wool is coarse beneath your palms, worked thread that has crossed how many miles, carried how many weights. The weave holds the pattern of its making, tight, deliberate, meant to last longer than the campaign that uses it. The singing outside has stopped. Voices continue, lower now, the rhythm of conversation rather than celebration. Men speaking in Turkmen and Persian and Arabic. The languages mixing in the darkness the way they mix in daylight, but softer now, blurred by distance and fatigue, and the particular peace that comes after worry ends. Your work stands complete, while others celebrate its result. This is exactly where you need to be. The cardamom tea has been your constant companion. 73 cups across this siege. You have counted. The counting helped during Nader's loudest audiences. The bronze pot sits on the brazier's edge, maintaining temperature without boiling. You learned this trick in the second week. Too hot, and the cardamom burns bitter. Too cool, and it loses the warmth that makes it worth drinking at all. The balance requires attention. Everything in this tent has required attention. You pour the 74th cup now, watching the dark liquid fill the small ceramic vessel. The scent rises. Spice and heat, and the particular comfort of a ritual that has remained constant while everything else shifted. Steam curls upward in the firelight. You cup your hands around the warmth. The first sip tastes exactly like the 73 that came before it. This is the point. Consistency in a world where supply lines fail and cavalry commanders speak in proverbs, and the Shah's temper determines whether your morning briefing ends in approval or execution. The tea does not change. The tea is reliable. You settle back against the cushions, the cup resting in both palms. The silk beneath you has shaped itself to your weight over 3 weeks of late-night calculations and pre-dawn briefings, and the long afternoons, when the heat made working at the main table impossible but the work still needed doing. This corner of the tent has become yours through repetition. The same position, the same cushions, the same cup. Outside, the celebration has quieted to conversation. Voices low and steady. The percussion of men too tired to drum but not tired enough to sleep yet. You recognize this state. You have been living in it for days. The space between exhaustion and collapse where the body continues, because stopping feels more difficult than moving forward. The tea cools in your hands. You drink slowly, letting each sip register. Warmth on your tongue. The cardamom's slight bitterness beneath the sweetness. The weight of the cup, small and solid, details that anchor you to the present moment, instead of the calculations still turning over in the back of your mind about tomorrow's occupation logistics, and the grain redistribution that will need to happen once the garrison evacuates, and the 17 smaller administrative tasks that should not matter now, but still do. The Armenian cartographer drinks his tea black, no sweetener, no spice. You learned this during the long afternoon in week 2, when both of you were reviewing elevation charts, and he accepted your offer of refreshment without comment. He finished the cup in 4 precise sips, set it down, and returned to the maps. You have never seen him drink socially. You have never seen him drink for pleasure. He drinks for function, the same way he approaches everything else. The Turkmen commander takes his tea with honey and drinks it from a bowl instead of a cup, both hands wrapped around the ceramic, as if the warmth in his palms matters more than the warmth in his throat. He drinks slowly, between sentences, using the pauses to decide which proverb applies to the current negotiation. You have learned to read those pauses. A quick sip means he is about to agree. A long one means you need to offer something better. You finish your cup, set it down beside the brazier. The ceramic clicks softly against the brass tray that holds the pot and the small container of cardamom pods and the honey jar you have not opened in 3 days, because exhaustion has made sweetness feel excessive. 74 cups. The number matters less than the counting. The counting provided structure, when structure was the only thing holding the day together. Morning tea before the dawn briefing. Midday tea, during the afternoon heat. Evening tea, while finalizing the day's reports. Night tea, when sleep refused to come, and the maps needed one more review. The rhythm built itself cup by cup, a framework of small, reliable moments in a campaign where nothing else was small, and very little was reliable. The pot still holds enough for one more cup. You leave it, tomorrow will come whether you drink it or not. The brazier's coals glow steady and low. The tent has achieved the particular warmth that comes from careful fire management and windless nights. The cushions beneath you hold your weight without resistance. The darkness beyond the tent walls is complete now, the kind of darkness that comes when fires burn down and men finally stop moving. The camp settles into itself. Leather creaks as saddles cool, metal ticks as it releases the day's heat. Horses shift in their lines, hooves soft against earth, the sound of large animals choosing rest. Your own breath slows to match the quiet. In, out. The air in the tent carries cardamom still, and beneath it the smell of wool and silk, and the particular scent of parchment that has been handled often. The carpet beneath you holds warmth borrowed from the brazier. Your spine settles into the cushions one vertebra at a time. The tea ritual ends not with ceremony but with stillness. The pot cooling, the cup empty, the counting done. Your hands rest open in your lap. The warmth from the ceramic has faded, but the memory of it remains. A small comfort, a completed pattern. You close your eyes. The celebration outside has faded to near silence, just the occasional voice, and the distant sound of canvas moving in whatever small breeze has found its way through camp. Your hands still hold the memory of the cup's warmth. Your throat still carries the cardamom's slight burn. 74 cups, 1 siege, the work complete. The grain redirection secured 2,000 riders. This is the victory no one will sing about tonight. Nader never learned how close the alliance came to collapse. He sees cavalry on the field tomorrow, and assumes loyalty purchased with gold and promises. He does not see the ledger work that happened in this tent while he planned the artillery positions. He does not see the 3-day margin you found by rerouting a convoy through terrain the original quartermaster deemed impassable. He does not see the 17 recalculations required to convince the Turkmen commander that his horses would be fed through winter. The supply victory happened in ledgers rather than battlefields. This makes it no less real. You stand slowly, your body protesting the movement after an hour against the cushions. The maps are still spread across the writing table, not the tactical ones showing troop positions and artillery range, but the supply maps showing grain stores and water sources, and the complex geometry of keeping 80,000 men fed in hostile territory. These are the maps that mattered. The Armenian cartographer's route revision sits on top. The line he drew saved 3 days of travel time, 3 days of grain consumption, 3 days that became the difference between maintaining the Turkmen alliance and watching 2,000 cavalry riders leave for someone who could feed their horses. You run your finger along the route he marked. The elevation changes are noted in his small, precise script. The terrain advantages are marked with symbols you have learned to read. The entire revision is a masterwork of efficiency that will never be displayed in any command tent after this campaign ends. You fold the map carefully. It joins the others in the leather case that holds the campaign's documentation. Someday, if anyone reviews these materials, they will see the route change noted in the daily logs. They will not see the crisis it prevented. They will not see the midnight meeting where the Turkmen commander made it clear, without stating it directly, that his loyalty had a grain-based expiration date. They will not see the calculation you ran 6 times to make sure the numbers held. The supply victory is invisible by design. Visible supply problems mean you failed. Invisible supply problems mean you succeeded before anyone noticed there was a problem to solve. This is the nature of logistics. You keep the machine running smoothly enough that no one thinks about the machine. The celebration outside has ended. The camp has settled into the particular quiet that follows victory. Exhaustion and relief mixed together. Men sleeping where they stand. The tension that held everyone upright for 3 weeks finally releasing. You move to the tent entrance, pulling back the canvas enough to see out. The fires have burned down to coals. The darkness is complete except for scattered points of orange where sentries maintain their posts, and a few officers finish final tasks before allowing themselves rest. The air carries the smell of extinguished flames and cooling metal, and the dust that never quite settles in a military camp. Baghdad's walls are invisible from here, but you know their position. Tomorrow morning they open. The garrison evacuates. The occupation begins. Nader enters the city in triumph. The campaign advances. All of this happens because the supply lines held, and the cavalry stayed, and the mathematics worked. No one will mention your name in the victory reports. This is correct. The strategist who becomes famous is the strategist who let something go wrong enough that fixing it became visible. Your success is measured in problems that never reached Nader's attention. You let the canvas fall closed. Return to the cushions. The tent holds its warmth. Your body holds its exhaustion. The weight settles deeper now, into bone, into the quiet place beneath thought, where sleep finally becomes possible. The leather case rests against the tent wall, buckled closed, holding the proof of 3 weeks rendered as ink and parchment. The maps inside will yellow with time. The script will fade. The numbers will remain true, even when no one remembers what crisis they prevented, or which commander's loyalty they secured, or how many horses were fed. Because someone found 3 days in terrain the Empire's best quartermaster had dismissed as impassable. Your shoulders release against the silk, your spine lengthens into rest. The brazier's coals pulse soft orange. Barely light, barely heat, enough to keep the air from cooling too quickly, but not enough to disturb the darkness that has settled over everything. The grain redirection secured 2,000 riders, the numbers balanced, the alliance held, the victory happened in silence, the way the best victories do. Tomorrow others will celebrate what they see. Tonight you rest knowing what they did not. Your eyes close. The tent darkens. The warmth remains. The counting is done. The Armenian cartographer's quiet correction of your supply route won this siege before it began. His genius reveals terrain secrets. He has done this for 3 campaigns. You have learned to check with him first. He enters the command tent just before evening prayers, carrying nothing but a small leather satchel worn smooth by travel. No maps this time. No corrections. The siege is over. Baghdad's gates will open tomorrow, under terms that preserve honor on both sides, and prevent the civilian bloodbath that would have followed a storming. You gesture to the cushions near the brazier. He sits with the careful economy of someone who has spent decades moving through war camps where drawing attention can be fatal. The elevation advantage, you say. Chapter 8. That positioned our artillery where it mattered. He nods once. not accepting praise, confirming a fact. And the water sources you marked in the northern approach, you continue. That kept the cavalry horses operational when the heat turned everything else into an endurance test. The land reveals itself, he says quietly, if you learn its grammar. His Persian carries an Armenian accent that 3 decades of military service has not erased. The grammar is perfect, the rhythm is his own. You pour tea, cardamom and something darker, cloves perhaps. The bronze pot has been on the brazier long enough that the temperature is exactly where it needs to be. You have corrected my route calculations in 3 campaigns, you say. Saved supply convoys, positioned artillery, found water where the scouts reported none. He accepts the cup with both hands. And you have never, you continue, asked for recognition, never demanded a title, never requested formal acknowledgement from the Shah. The cartographer drinks his tea, sets the cup down carefully. Recognition makes you visible, he says. Visibility makes you a target. I prefer to do the work. It is the longest statement you have heard from him in 3 campaigns. You respect the clarity. The Shah knows, you say. The Shah knows what wins battles. The cartographer's voice carries no bitterness. Maps do not negotiate. They do not require honor. They show what is. Outside, the camp is settling into the rhythms of an army that has just taken a city, without losing 1/10 of its strength to siege attrition. Distant laughter, the smell of roasting meat, drums somewhere beyond the eastern perimeter. You could request a position, you say, chief cartographer, formal rank, a stipend that reflects the value of what you provide. He refills his own cup without asking permission. It is the gesture of someone who has moved past formality into something closer to professional partnership. I have a position, he says. I make maps that keep men alive. The work continues whether or not someone writes my name in a register. You have built supply systems that sustained 80,000 men through desert campaigns. Negotiated with tribal commanders who measure loyalty in horses and grain. Translated Turkmen proverbs into logistical commitments. But this man's genius operates in a different register entirely. He sees terrain the way you see supply chains, as a system with rules that can be learned and applied with precision. The next campaign, you say. When the Shah moves north toward the Caucasus, I will need your maps before the army marches. The mountains reveal themselves slowly, he says. I will begin the surveys at first light. He finishes his tea, rises without ceremony. The leather satchel goes over one shoulder, with the practiced motion of someone who has carried the same weight across 3 campaigns and 17 siege camps. At the tent entrance he pauses. Your supply calculations, he says. Chapter 4. The grain shortfall you identified 3 days before it became critical. You nod. That prevented a cavalry mutiny, he continues. The Turkmen commander never knew how close his men came to breaking their alliance. You gave him the provisions that maintained his loyalty, without him needing to request them. It is the first time the cartographer has commented on your work rather than correcting it. We do what the campaign requires, you say. Yes, he says, we do. Then he is gone. The tent flap settles behind him. Outside the evening wind is picking up, not the killing heat of midday. Something cooler, almost gentle. You return to the cushions. The tea is still warm. Tomorrow, the occupation begins. Officers will move into administrative positions. Grain stores will be inventoried. The civilian population will adjust to new governance. The work continues. But tonight, for the first time in 3 weeks, the command tent holds no maps spread across carpets awaiting your verification. No supply manifests requiring immediate correction. No proverbs requiring translation into logistics. The bronze pot sits on the brazier's edge. You pour a final cup. The cardamom has steeped long enough that the flavor is almost too strong. You drink it anyway. Somewhere beyond the camp perimeter, the city of Baghdad is preparing for tomorrow's formalities. Somewhere to the north, the next campaign is already taking shape in terrain you have not yet seen, but that the Armenian cartographer will survey with the same quiet precision that won this siege before the first cannon fired. The work continues. But tonight, you allow yourself the luxury of stillness. The canvas overhead shifts in the wind. The brazier's coals glow orange in the gathering dark. Your shoulders release tension they have carried since the siege began. You set the empty cup beside the pot. Close your eyes. Listen to the camp settling into night. The cartographer's genius revealed itself through correction. Through showing you the terrain's truth before you made a decision that would have cost lives. 3 campaigns. 17 siege camps. Countless hours bent over maps that showed what is rather than what you hoped would be. Tomorrow, the formalities. Tonight, rest. The Turkmen cavalry commander taught you a language that has no written grammar. Eagles do not hunt mice. That meant, do not waste elite units on minor objectives. The wolf respects the shepherd who feeds the flock. That meant, loyalty follows provision, not promises. A falcon returns to the branch that feeds it. That meant, maintain the supply of premium grain, and the 2,000 riders stay committed. You learnt this vocabulary under pressure. The first proverb arrived in chapter 7, when the heat had turned thought into something thick and difficult. The commander spoke. You translated badly. He corrected without cruelty. The learning curve was immediate. By chapter 12 you were fluent. The poetry of logistics. Each proverb. A compressed cultural transmission that carried generations of steppe wisdom about trust, provision, and the mathematics of horses that must eat daily, whether or not empires care about their hunger. The commander never explained, he tested. You either understood or you revealed ignorance. Ignorance meant delay. Delay meant hunger. Hunger meant the cavalry left. So you learned. The branch and the falcon became your shorthand for premium provisions. The wolf and the shepherd became your model for consistent grain delivery. The eagle and the mouse became your filter, for which objectives deserved elite cavalry, and which could be handled by infantry willing to die for significantly less impressive rations. Tonight, in the silence after the siege, you remember the weight of translation. The commander arrived at dawn with weather in his face and 2,000 riders whose loyalty was measured in what you provided before they asked. He spoke in proverbs. You answered in grain weights and delivery schedules. The bridge was built, not through shared language, but through the cartographer's genius revealing where the supply routes could bear the weight. Cultural diplomacy reduced to its functional core. You fed the horses stayed operational, the riders remained committed. No written contract. No formal treaty. Just the steady rhythm of provision that the commander's proverbs described, and your supply systems delivered. The tent is dark now except for the brazier's last coals. You think of the commander's face when you delivered the falcon provisions in chapter 12. Not gratitude, recognition. You had learnt the vocabulary, the alliance held. The wind outside is settling. Somewhere in the camp, the Turkmen riders are sleeping near their horses, fed, loyal, ready for the next campaign. You close your eyes. The proverbs dissolve into warmth. Nader Shah's voice fills a tent the way summer thunder fills a valley. You have survived 6 audiences. Each one a test of whether your plans can withstand volcanic examination. The Shah does not critique quietly. He interrogates at volume. Every assumption must justify itself. Every calculation must prove it can bear the weight of 80,000 lives. The tent always smells different afterward, not fear exactly, intensity. The air holds the residue of decisions made under pressure that would crush most men into silent compliance. You learned to present plans that arrived at his conclusions independently. Not manipulation, survival. The Shah is brilliant, tactically aggressive, impatient with incompetence, and capable of detecting even subtle forms of it. If your supply mathematics are wrong, he will find the error before you finish explaining the system. If your cultural diplomacy is performance rather than function, he will strip it to its core and show you where it fails. So you learn to do the work correctly before entering his presence. The artillery positioning that won the siege. You presented it as emerging from terrain analysis and the cartographer's elevation advantage, which it did. But you presented it in a sequence that led the Shah to the same conclusion you had reached hours earlier. He approved it as his own tactical insight, you executed it as his order. The result was the same. The city fell without excessive casualties. The terms preserved honor. The occupation begins tomorrow with civilian cooperation rather than resistance. Tonight, the tent is yours. No maps awaiting volcanic examination. No supply manifests requiring defense under interrogation. No tactical proposals that must survive the Shah's aggressive instincts before becoming operational orders. Just warmth, stillness, the slow dissolution of 3 weeks' tension. You sink into silk pillows that have absorbed the weight of too many decisions. Your breathing slows. The brazier's coals fade to a dim glow that barely illuminates the canvas overhead. The bronze pot still holds faint heat. You rest one hand against its curve. Metal holds memory. The pot remembers boiling water and cardamom seeds crushed at dawn. Your palm absorbs that stored warmth. Simple physics becomes comfort. Somewhere beyond the camp, Nader Shah is already planning the northern campaign. Somewhere in the command structure, officers are preparing tomorrow's occupation protocols. Somewhere in the city, the Ottoman envoy is writing his report on honorable defeat. You are here, breathing, resting. The Shah's temper was the forge, you were the iron, the campaign was the blade that resulted. Tomorrow continues. Tonight dissolves. Your eyes close. The warmth holds you. The Ottoman envoy stands in the center of the command tent. His robes are dusty from the journey through the siege lines, but he has arranged them with care before entering. His hands are empty. His posture is upright. He carries no weapons, no documents, no leverage, only the weight of a city's fate and the dignity of an empire that has just lost Baghdad. You gesture toward the cushions arranged along the northern side of the tent. He inclines his head fractionally and sits with the careful economy of a man who knows he is negotiating from a position of absolute defeat but refuses to make it easy. The terms, he says in Persian that carries the formal cadence of diplomatic training, are acceptable to the governor. The garrison will withdraw with honor. The civilian population will remain unmolested. These conditions reflect well on the Shah's wisdom. The phrasing is deliberate. He is giving Nader Shah credit for mercy, while simultaneously making it clear that any deviation from the agreed terms would be a loss of that same wisdom. It is a negotiation that has already concluded, conducted by a man who understands that the only currency he has left is the arrangement of words. The Shah's word is given, you say. The terms stand as written. The envoy's shoulders drop half an inch. Not relief. Something closer to the acknowledgement that the thing he came to ensure has been secured. He has carried the weight of an impossible task into a tent full of his enemies, and emerged with the best outcome available to him. It is not victory. It is survival with honor intact. Then I will return to the governor with the final confirmation, he says. He rises with the same careful dignity he brought into the tent. His hand moves to his chest in the formal gesture of respect between equals, which is absurd given the circumstances but also the only move available to a man who refuses to collapse under the weight of what has just been lost. You return the gesture, not because protocol requires it, because the man standing across from you has just carried an empire's dignity through a siege camp and managed not to drop it. He turns and leaves the tent without looking back. The canvas falls closed behind him. The sound of his footsteps fades into the broader noise of the camp. Soldiers moving between fires, the distant clatter of evening meal preparation, the low hum of 80,000 men settling into the rhythm of occupation rather than siege. The brazier's warmth spreads through the tent's interior. The afternoon heat has begun its slow retreat, leaving behind the kind of temperature that no longer presses against the skin, but simply exists as neutral fact. The tea in the bronze pot has cooled past the point of drinking. You leave it where it sits. Outside, the wind shifts direction. The canvas walls ripple once, then settle. The desert carries its own silence now. Not the tense quiet of a siege waiting to break, but the empty sound of a concluded thing. Baghdad's walls no longer hold defiance. The Ottoman garrison is preparing its withdrawal. The civilian population has been granted protection. The terms are finalized in 3 languages and sealed with the governor's authority. The cushions beneath you hold the accumulated weight of 24 days, spent translating proverbs into supply requisitions, managing the fragile mathematics of alliance, and preventing Nader Shah's temper from collapsing the entire structure before it could be used. The Armenian cartographer's corrected route saved the campaign. The Turkmen cavalry commander's loyalty was secured through careful attention to the grammar of horses and grain. The artillery adjustments bought 3 extra days of bombardment. The supply calculations held together despite the convoy delay that nearly exposed the whole system. None of it shows in the final terms. The document describes a siege that proceeded according to plan, conducted by forces that never wavered, resulting in an outcome that was never in doubt. It does not mention the 3 days you spent recalculating grain stores to keep the Turkmen alliance from fracturing. It does not record the moment the Armenian cartographer's silence communicated that your original supply route would have killed the campaign through sheer logistical failure. It does not preserve the proverb negotiations or the translation work, or the careful management of a volcanic temper that could have incinerated the entire strategy with one poorly timed outburst. The victory belongs to Nader Shah. The terms reflect his wisdom and his mercy. The garrison withdraws with honor because he allowed it. The civilian population is protected because he commanded it. The historical record will show a siege conducted with precision and concluded with magnanimity. You lean back against the cushions and close your eyes. The tent's interior has darkened with the failing light. The brazier's glow provides the only illumination, casting slow shadows across the carpet where the maps used to be spread. The sound of the camp continues outside. Familiar now, almost restful. Voices calling instructions. The distant percussion of tent stakes being driven into harder ground for the occupation phase. Hoofbeats marking the rotation of perimeter patrols. The Ottoman envoy maintained his dignity because the terms allowed him to. Victory required no humiliation. The garrison leaves with weapons and honor intact. The governor retains his position under new authority. The city transitions without bloodshed. These are not accidents of mercy. They are calculated decisions designed to make occupation possible, without requiring the permanent garrison that would drain resources Nader Shah needs for the next campaign. But the envoy does not know that. He knows only that he entered a tent expecting the worst terms available, and left with something better. He will return to the governor with the confirmation that the siege has ended, and the city has been spared the usual aftermath of resistance. He will be remembered as the man who negotiated honorable surrender from a position of total defeat. It is not a small thing. The silk pillows receive the full weight of your head. The carpet beneath you holds the warmth retained from the afternoon sun. The air carries the faint trace of cardamom and cooling metal and canvas that has absorbed a full day's heat and is now releasing it back into the evening. Outside, someone is singing, one of the Turkmen cavalry songs about horses and distant water. The melody carries across the camp without urgency, just sound moving through open space. Your eyes stay closed. The darkness behind your eyelids is warm and complete. Your hands rest open on the carpet. Your breathing slows to match the camp's evening rhythm. Steady, unhurried, the pace of work finished rather than work paused. The Ottoman envoy is walking back through the siege lines now, carrying the confirmation that will end the standoff and begin the transition. The garrison is preparing its withdrawal columns. The civilian population is learning that the siege has concluded without the violence they spent weeks preparing for. The governor is reading the final terms and understanding that his city has been preserved at the cost of its sovereignty. And you are here, in a tent that smells like cold tea and warm silk, feeling the day's heat fade from the air. The maps are rolled and stored. The supply calculations are complete. The translation work is done. The strategy that kept this campaign from collapsing under its own complexity has delivered the outcome it promised. Baghdad yields. The empire advances. The terms stand as written. The braziers' heat radiates in slow circles that reach your face, then your hands, then fade into the cooler air gathering near the tent's edges. The temperature no longer demands attention. It simply exists, warmth layered over coolness, both present, neither winning. The canvas overhead hangs perfectly still now. The wind that moved through camp all afternoon has dropped to nothing. What remains is air that has stopped traveling, content to rest in the space between tent walls and evening sky. Your chest rises and falls in rhythm with that stillness. Breath moving in, breath moving out. The pattern requires no thought. Your jaw releases its last held tension. The muscles in your neck soften degree by degree. Your shoulders settle deeper into the silk beneath them. The body is learning what the mind already knows. The work is finished. What required constant vigilance for 24 days now requires only rest. The transition happens slowly, but it happens. The singing outside has stopped. The melody dissolved back into the general quiet of evening routines concluding. What takes its place is the low murmur of men speaking to each other in the language of fatigue. Short phrases, long pauses, the verbal shorthand of soldiers who have shared the same exhaustion and no longer need complete sentences to communicate. The light from the brazier dims further. The coals are burning through their fuel, giving the last of their heat to the tent's interior before collapsing into ash. The glow is orange, then amber, then something closer to red. It paints the tent ceiling in shades that deepen with each minute. Your eyelids register the changing light even closed. Brightness fading, darkness approaching, the visible world preparing to disappear entirely. The carpet's weave presses gently against your shoulders. You can feel the individual threads if you pay attention, but paying attention requires effort that no longer seems necessary. Better to let the texture exist without naming it. Better to let the warmth exist without measuring it. Better to let the darkness arrive without marking its progress. Baghdad's walls stand under new authority now. The terms are sealed. The envoy carries confirmation back through lines that have already ceased to matter. And somewhere in the geometry of silk and shadow, your body continues its slow descent toward the rest it has earned. The wind settles as evening deepens. The canvas walls stop their restless movement and hang still against the tent frame. The air inside the command tent no longer circulates. It simply rests, warm and motionless, holding the day's accumulated heat without adding to it. You remain where the last chapter left you, body sinking deeper into the cushions with each breath. The silk fabric yields without resistance. The carpet beneath holds you with the steady pressure of ground that has supported countless nights of strategic planning, and now supports only rest. Outside, the camp sounds continue their slow recession towards sleep. Voices fade to murmurs. The percussion of tent stakes stops entirely. Hoofbeats become less frequent, marking longer intervals between patrols. The army is transitioning from the operational rhythm of siege to the slower cadence of occupation, a shift that happens without orders, just the collective recognition that the urgent work is finished, and what remains can wait for morning. The brazier has burned down to its last coals. The glow is orange and dim, barely enough to distinguish the tent's interior from full darkness. Heat radiates from the bronze in slow waves, warming the space immediately around it while the outer edges of the tent cool with the desert night. The temperature difference creates a gradient, warmth concentrated near the center, coolness gathering at the periphery, and you exist in the boundary between them, neither hot nor cold, just held in balance. The distant victory fires are visible through the tent's opening, small points of light scattered across the camp's perimeter. They burn lower now than they did an hour ago, fed with less wood, tended by men who are themselves settling toward rest. The fires will last through the night, maintaining the boundary between occupied ground and open desert, but they no longer announce celebration. They mark presence without urgency. The jasmine scent you noticed earlier has strengthened with the evening air. It drifts through the tent, opening in subtle waves, mixing with the smell of cooling bronze and silk that has absorbed 24 days of strategic tension and is now releasing it. The combination is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just the specific signature of this place at this hour, the olfactory record of a siege concluded. Your breathing has slowed to match the camp's rhythm, deep inhalations that fill the chest without effort, long exhalations that empty completely before the next breath begins. The pattern requires no thought. Your body has found its own pace, synchronized with the cooling air and the settling canvas, and the distant fires burning down to embers. The command tent has achieved something it has not known since the siege began: true stillness, no maps being moved, no documents being drafted, no officers entering with reports that require immediate response, no calculations being run to verify that the numbers still hold, no translation work converting proverbs to requisitions, or territorial pride to operational reality. Just empty space filled with cooling air and failing light and the distant sound of a camp learning how to stop. The cushions beneath your head smell like silk and wood smoke and the specific staleness of fabric that has been inside a tent for weeks without laundering. Your weight has created a depression in their surface, a shape that matches your body's contours and requires no adjustment. The carpet beneath holds warmth in its fibers, not the aggressive heat of afternoon but the retained warmth of ground that spent the day absorbing sun, and is now giving it back degree by degree. The wind that moved constantly through the camp during daylight has dropped to nothing. The air outside is as still as the air inside. The temperature continues its gradual fall toward the desert night's baseline, cold enough to require blankets, but that is hours away and requires no action now. For this moment, the warmth still held in tent fabric and carpet fibers is sufficient. The bronze pot that held cardamom tea sits cold and forgotten at the brazier's edge. The tea itself has gone from warm to cool to room temperature to something below that, following the air's trajectory toward night. You make no move to clear it. The pot can wait for morning. Everything can wait for morning. The urgent work is finished. What remains is maintenance and documentation, tasks that belong to daylight and fresh energy, not to this hour, when the body has finally understood that it is allowed to stop. Your eyes remain closed. The darkness behind your eyelids matches the darkness filling the tent's corners. The brazier's glow is too dim now to penetrate closed eyelids, existing only as a faint warmth on the side of your face turned toward it. The boundary between waking and sleep has become porous. Thoughts drift without completing themselves. The siege, the terms, the envoy's dignity, the Armenian cartographer's quiet genius, the Turkmen proverbs, Nader Shah's volcanic approval, all of it present but distant, like smoke from fires already burning low. The canvas overhead has stopped moving entirely. The wind that rippled it throughout the day and filled the tent with the constant white noise of fabric under tension has vanished. What remains is silence layered over silence, the camp's reduced activity, the dying fires, the cooling bronze, the still air, the empty space between one breath and the next. Your hands rest where they fell, palms open, fingers curved slightly inward. The position happened without decision. They simply stopped moving and remained in the shape gravity gave them. No tension holds them. No unconscious adjustment shifts them. They exist in perfect stillness, warmed by the air trapped between skin and carpet. The night continues its slow work of cooling everything the day heated. Metal releases its warmth first, the bronze pot, the brazier's frame, the tent stakes driven into hard ground. Then fabric, canvas, silk, the wool of blankets not yet needed. Then earth, the carpet, the ground beneath it, the packed dirt that forms the tent's floor. Each material surrendering its accumulated heat at its own rate, creating a cascade of temperatures that will eventually reach equilibrium hours from now. Your heartbeat is steady and slow. The pulse in your neck marks time without urgency. 70 beats per minute, then 65, then 60. The body adjusting to rest, blood moving through its circuits at the pace of maintenance rather than action. Your chest rises and falls with each breath, a motion so gentle it barely disturbs the silk beneath your shoulders. The camp beyond has entered its deepest quiet. The last conversations have concluded. The final tasks of evening routine have been completed. What remains is the sound of 80,000 men breathing in darkness, each one settling into whatever rest the hard ground and wool blankets allow. Sentries walk their routes in silence. Horses stand with heads lowered. The occupation of Baghdad begins tomorrow, but tonight belongs to the stillness that follows all finished things. The silk receives your weight completely now. No resistance. No adjustment required. The pillows have molded to the shape of your head and shoulders, holding you in the specific position your body chose, without conscious thought. The fabric is cool against your skin, where it makes contact, warm everywhere else from the heat your body continues to generate. The command tent exists in full darkness now. The brazier's coals have faded to black. The victory fires outside have burned too low to cast light through the tent's opening. What remains is the specific darkness of enclosed space at night, not threatening, not empty, just the absence of light replaced by the presence of warmth and stillness and breath. Your heartbeat is slow and steady. You can feel it without placing a hand to your chest. The slight pulse in your neck, the gentle pressure in your temples, the rhythm that continues without requiring attention or permission. 70 beats per minute, then 60, then something lower still, as the body recognizes that no threat exists, and no action is required. The carpet beneath you holds accumulated warmth in its woven threads. Your weight has compressed it slightly, creating a depression that matches your body's outline. The pressure is even and constant. Not the sharp discomfort of hard ground, but the supported feeling of lying on something that yields enough to be comfortable, while remaining firm enough to hold shape. The air you breathe carries no urgency, cool on the inhale, warm on the exhale. The difference in temperature marks the exchange happening in your lungs. Oxygen moving in, carbon dioxide moving out, the basic transaction that sustains everything else. The breath requires no effort. Your diaphragm moves on its own, contracting and releasing in a pattern older than conscious thought. The distant sound of the camp has faded almost to nothing. Occasional footsteps, a murmured exchange between sentries, the creak of leather as someone shifts position. Small sounds that mark presence without activity, the auditory signature of 80,000 men, settling into rest after weeks of operational tension. The siege is over. The garrison is withdrawing. The city is secure. Sleep has become possible. The jasmine scent continues to drift through the tent, opening in subtle waves. It mixes with the smell of cold bronze and silken carpet fibers, and the specific staleness of canvas that has enclosed this space for 24 days. Your olfactory system registers these elements without naming them. They exist as fact rather than description, the chemical signature of this particular place at this particular hour. Your hands rest open on the carpet, palms up, fingers slightly curled. The position happened without decision. Your arms found their resting place and stopped moving. The muscles in your forearms have released completely. No tension remains in your wrists. Your fingers make no unconscious adjustments. They simply exist in the shape they have chosen, held by the same stillness that has filled the tent and the camp and the night air beyond. The boundary between your body and the space around it has softened. The carpet supports you. The silk receives you. The air surrounds you. The darkness holds you. These are not separate facts. They are variations of the same condition. Support, reception, surrounding, holding. The tent has become indistinguishable from rest itself. Your breathing continues its slow rhythm, each inhalation slightly deeper than the last, each exhalation slightly longer. The pattern is descending towards sleep through incremental adjustments, too small to notice individually, but unmistakable in aggregate. Your body is navigating the transition without guidance, following the same path it has followed 10,000 times before, from waking to rest, to the deeper rest beyond rest. The night air outside has reached its coldest point. The temperature will hold here for hours before beginning its slow climb toward dawn. Inside the tent, the retained warmth creates a buffer against that cold. The space remains neutral, not hot, not cold, just the temperature at which a body can rest without discomfort or adjustment. Your eyes remain closed behind closed eyelids. The darkness is complete and featureless. No shapes, no shadows, no gradations of light. Just black that extends in all directions, indistinguishable from the black behind your eyelids, creating the illusion that the tent's interior and the space inside your skull are the same continuous darkness. The silk beneath your head holds the faint warmth of your scalp. The fabric has absorbed the heat your body produces and now radiates it back in gentle waves. This exchange happens continuously, heat given, heat returned, creating a microclimate of perfect temperature in the small space between silk and skin. Your jaw has released entirely. The muscles that hold your mouth closed have softened. Your lips rest slightly parted. Air moves through the gap with each breath. In through barely open lips, out through the same channel. The sound is almost inaudible, just the whisper of breath itself, the gentlest evidence that you continue to exist. The canvas walls no longer hold any memory of movement. They hang in perfect stillness, as motionless as walls made of stone or wood. The wind has vanished so completely it seems impossible it ever existed. What remains is air that has stopped traveling, content to rest in place, asking nothing, providing nothing except the basic medium through which breath can move. Your thoughts are fragmented into images without words. The Ottoman envoy's careful posture, the Armenian cartographer's quiet correction, the Turkmen commander's hand on his horse's neck, Nader Shah's approval, delivered in the language of empires, the maps rolled and stored, the terms sealed in 3 languages. None of these images demand attention. They simply pass through the darkness behind your eyes, like distant figures crossing a field at dusk. Present, then receding, then gone. The warmth from the long-dead brazier has distributed itself evenly throughout the tent's interior. No hot spots remain. No cold corners demand adjustment. The temperature has reached equilibrium, the point where air and fabric and skin all hold the same gentle heat, and the body can forget about temperature entirely, because nothing requires response. Your shoulders have settled into the carpet's weave. The individual threads no longer register as texture. They have become continuous surface, as smooth and supportive as water. Your spine has found its natural curve. Your hips rest at the angle that requires the least muscular effort to maintain. Your legs lie straight, feet turn slightly outward, the position of complete release. The night continues around you without requiring witness. Sentries complete their rounds. Horses shift their weight from hoof to hoof. The distant city breathes under new authority. The Ottoman garrison prepares for tomorrow's withdrawal. The empire advances one siege at a time. All of it happening, all of it complete, all of it continuing without needing you to carry it. The silk pillows hold everything now. Not just the physical weight of your head, but the accumulated weight of 3 weeks spent preventing collapse through constant attention. That weight has transferred completely. The fabric receives it, the darkness absorbs it, your body releases it, the transaction is finished. Breath. In, out. Slower now. The darkness complete, warm and still. Silk beneath. Air above, no boundary between. The camp silent beyond the canvas. Victory fires ember dark. Baghdad's walls holding new authority. The garrison columns already forming for tomorrow's withdrawal. Terms finalized. Occupation beginning. Empire advancing one calculated siege at a time. Your heartbeat distant, steady, 60 beats, 50. The rhythm that continues without witness. The Armenian cartographers' maps rolled and stored. The Turkmen cavalry settled near their horses. Nader Shah sleeping in the larger tent where commanders sleep. The Ottoman envoy carrying confirmation back through lines that no longer hold threat. All of it continuing without requiring your attention. The night air cool against the one part of your face not pressed into silk, the jasmine scent fainter now. Mixed with cooling bronze. Canvas. Carpet fibers holding the last of the day's retained warmth. Your body has found the position it will hold until morning. Weight distributed. Muscles released. No adjustment coming. This is the shape of rest. The bronze pot cold beside the brazier's dead coals. The cardamom tea forgotten. The command tent empty of everything, except darkness and stillness, and your breath moving through it. In. Out. The space between breaths longer now. Your thoughts fragmenting toward nothing. Not the active nothing of waiting, but the soft nothing of consciousness dissolving. The siege, the strategy, the calculations, the translations, all of it receding, present but distant, like sound from fires burning low. The cushions receive everything, the weight of your head, the weight of the campaign, the weight of 3 weeks spent preventing collapse through attention and precision, and the careful arrangement of grain stores and proverbs and artillery angles. Released now. The silk pillows holding shape, the carpet holding warmth, the tent holding darkness, the night holding the tent, the desert holding the night. Each container within a larger container, extending outward toward something too vast to name. Your breathing barely audible. The gentlest movement of air, through an open mouth. In, through relaxed lips. Out through the same channel. No sound, except the whisper of breath itself. The camp beyond sleeping now. 80,000 men settled into rest. Sentries walking their routes in silence. Horses standing with heads lowered. Fires collapsed to ash. The whole vast machinery of siege and occupation suspended in the hours between night and dawn. And you here, in this tent, on this carpet, against this silk, breathing air that smells like jasmine and cold metal and canvas, and the accumulated stillness of a finished thing. Your fingers motionless, your heartbeat slow. Your thoughts no longer forming complete sentences. Just fragments. Just images. Just the sensation of weight released and darkness received, and breath continuing without effort. The Ottoman envoy's dignity preserved. The Armenian cartographer's genius unrecorded. the Turkmen commander's loyalty secured. Nader Shah's temper never ignited. The supply lines held. The campaign succeeded. Baghdad yielded. And now, rest. The silk receives. The darkness holds. The breath continues. In. Out. Slower still. The world beyond the canvas existing without your attention. The siege finished. The terms set. The occupation beginning. The empire advancing. All of it continuing. All of it complete. Your body sinking deeper. Not falling. Sinking. Supported by silken carpet and the specific warmth of enclosed space at night. The weight transferred entirely. Nothing left to carry. Nothing left to calculate. Nothing left to prevent or manage or translate. Just breath. And darkness. And the silk pillows holding everything. The jasmine scent fading. The night air still. The camp silent. The bronze pot cold. The maps stored. The terms sealed. The victory fires ash. Your heartbeat distant now. Your thoughts dissolved. Your body motionless, except for the gentle rise and fall of breath. In. Out. The temperature of the air matches the temperature of your skin. No difference remains. The tent has become extension of body. The darkness has become extension of closed eyes. The stillness has become extension of released muscles. Somewhere beyond the canvas, the desert stretches toward horizons you cannot see. Somewhere in that desert, cities stand under new authority, and old walls hold new flags and empires advance through the geometry of siege and occupation. But here in this tent, in this darkness, on this silk, none of that requires carrying. Your breath moves without you, in, out. The body performing its most basic function, with the same reliability it has performed it since the first moment of your life. 60,000 breaths per day. This one. Then this one. Then this one. Each arriving. Each departing. Each requiring nothing except the slow opening and closing of lungs that remember how to work without instruction. The silk beneath your cheek has warmed to match your temperature. No cool spots remain, just continuous warmth. Just fabric that has received your weight so completely it no longer registers as separate from your own skin. Your jaw slack, your lips parted, your eyelids still. Your hands open, your feet turned outward. The body arranged in the position it chooses when consciousness stops interfering. This is the shape you return to. This is the form that rest takes when nothing prevents it. The campaign is memory now. The siege is record. The terms are history. What remains is breath and darkness and silk, and the final dissolving of everything that required attention into everything that simply is. In. Out. And in that darkness, in that stillness, in that complete and final release of everything that required carrying, you are sleeping. The breath continues, the night continues, the silk continues to hold you. And in the space between heartbeats, in the gap between one breath and the next, consciousness releases its last careful grip and lets the body do what bodies know how to do when the work is finished, and the terms are sealed and the empire can advance without witness. You are sleeping now. Deep and still and complete. The whole world sleeping with you.